Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to a brand new series on the channel. What if I was reborn in Naruto as the legendary Sannin Orochimaru with the mad scientist gamer system? Synopsis: after being reincarnated into the shinobi world, his soul replaces that of Orochimaru in his childhood. The boy from another world accepted his situation no matter the lunacy, and got to work. From then on, Orochimaru embarked on the path of scientific research ahead of schedule, not just thanks to his previous world's education but an RPG-styled system in the form of a box following him around and bending the very reality he now existed in. This new system enhanced his understanding of this new world of scientific practices, giving him the ability to enhance, modify, transplant, and clone genetic traits through various methods and apply them to whoever and whatever he saw fit. The limits were not broken but shattered by the new Orochimaru and his scientific breakthroughs, of which he used to control his own destiny. No longer will his fate be of a cruel, bloodthirsty maniac ninja scientist who became a rogue ninja hunted by both the leaf and akatsuki. He gained strength, love, and influence his own way, and rise to the peak of the ninja world. Make sure to check out the author linked in the description, and with that being said, let the tale begin. Chapter 1, Konoha, Year 16. Land of Fire, Konoha Village, Ninja Academy. Hey, Orochimaru. I challenge you, come on, fight me. In the noisy classroom, a white-haired boy dressed in a beige kimono with red trim stood on top of a desk, shouting at the black-haired boy with long, straight hair who was sitting calmly in front of him. The white-haired boy's skin had a slightly yellow hue, and his face was marked with red lines around his eyes. His frustration was palpable. He looked ready to duel right then and there. Despite the boy's fiery outburst, the black-haired boy Orochimaru paid him no mind. He glanced briefly at the scene and then returned to his thoughts, ignoring the challenge entirely. Seeing that he was being ignored, Jiraiya, the white-haired boy, shouted even louder, "Damn it, Orochimaru! Are you looking down on me?" Around them, other students began to murmur and laugh. Oh, are they gonna fight again? Haha, Jiraiya never learns. Right? He always gets beaten but still keeps challenging Orochimaru. It's kinda sad. Yeah, Orochimaru's not gonna bother this time, I bet. Why does he even try? He's no match for Orochimaru. The chatter from the classroom only served to irritate Jiraiya further. His face flushed with embarrassment, but Orochimaru remained unmoved, lost in his own world. I've reincarnated? And not only that, but I've ended up in the world of Naruto as the young Orochimaru? The realization hit him once again, harder than before. And the kid shouting at him? That's Jiraiya, my future comrade, one of the legendary Sannin, and the Toad Sage? Oh my god! The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Orochimaru. He had read countless reincarnation stories, never thinking that it could happen to him. But now it had. He had become part of the very trope he once read about. Is this real? Orochimaru chuckled bitterly, but after a few moments, he accepted the situation. After all, hadn't he fantasized about reincarnating countless times in his previous life? Now that it had actually happened, it was easier to come to terms with than he expected. The world he found himself in was one of death and danger, but the opportunity to start fresh, to live a new life in such a powerful world, was still a blessing in disguise. As he calmed himself down, he slowly raised his head and said, "You are mighty, Lord Jiraiya. How could I ever look down on you?" "You!" Jiraiya faltered, not expecting this response. He was only 6 years old and had no idea that Orochimaru wasn't even interested in a fight. Orochimaru's mind was focused on something far more important. Jiraiya's challenge was an unnecessary distraction. In reality, Orochimaru, or rather, the soul of the person who had become Orochimaru, had only arrived in this world 2 hours ago. Within that short period, his mind had been overwhelmed with thoughts, trying to process what had happened. He had just finished sifting through Orochimaru's memories and had fully grasped the gravity of his new situation. I really am Orochimaru. In the original Naruto series, Orochimaru had been hailed as a genius by the third Hokage, someone whose talent appeared only once in decades. But now, As he sat in this classroom, Orochimaru knew the truth of his situation. In this world, strength is tied to one's family and bloodline. But the current me, I don't have either. Orochimaru didn't have the legendary sage body of the Senju clan or the powerful Sharingan of the Uchiha. His parents had died just a few months ago, leaving him with little besides the name he was slowly making for himself. If it weren't for the forbidden techniques I later developed, the original Orochimaru would have amounted to nothing. I would have been far weaker than the top-tier shinobi. Orochimaru's thoughts drifted to his eventual confrontations with the Uchiha brothers, first Itachi, then Sasuke. He had tried to take Itachi's Sharingan, but Itachi had stopped him cold with just a glance. Later, Sasuke had easily bested him, and in the end, Orochimaru had been sealed away by Itachi's Totsuka blade. A truly tragic fate. And to make matters worse, Orochimaru was currently only 6 years old. He had neither the vast knowledge nor the power to influence anything significant yet. Even if I possess Orochimaru's genius, what does that amount to at this age? I'm too weak right now. Looking at Jiraiya's fiery expression, Orochimaru didn't even feel the urge to engage him. His disinterested attitude slowly doused Jiraiya's fighting spirit. "TCH, you're always like this," Jiraiya muttered, clearly disappointed. "You're so annoying." "Ugh, forget it. This is boring." With that, he hopped off Orochimaru's desk, making his way back to his seat. As he settled into his chair, he kicked his feet up onto his desk, trying to look as carefree as possible. Orochimaru ignored him completely. That's when a voice suddenly echoed in his mind, "Ding! Welcome to the mad scientist system." Orochimaru's eyes widened. He took a deep breath and asked inwardly, "Did you just say, system?" "What system?" "The mad scientist system, host," the voice replied cheerfully. "Mad scientist system?" Orochimaru was stunned. A system. The ultimate gift for any reincarnator. He had read enough web novels to know what this meant. Getting a system was essentially a cheat code for life. It could help you grow stronger, faster, and perhaps smarter than anyone else. With a system, one could soar to the heights of power. And now, Orochimaru had his own system. The thought alone was enough to make any reincarnator rejoice. After all, how could you even call yourself a proper reincarnator without a system to back you up? Chapter 2, A System Focused on Science? He pondered the possibilities. This could truly lead to groundbreaking advancements in the world of ninjas. In this world, even if someone like Pain could destroy a city with a mere thought, science might offer a way to challenge such overwhelming power. The possibilities began to stir within him. What if science could bridge the gap between bloodlines and chakra? Host, as the owner of the mad scientist system, you should firmly believe that science is the foundation of all life. It is the key to progress, capable of altering the very fabric of this world, the system declared with confidence. Orochimaru mulled over the idea. Can science truly compete with the power of the Akatsuki bloodline? Can it create something as monumental as the moon, like the Sage of Six Paths did? His voice was cautious, yet tinged with intrigue. Host, such feats fall under the field of genetics. If the host dedicates time to studying genetics, those achievements can be within reach. Genetics? Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed with interest. So you're saying science can give me the sage body? Certainly, the system confirmed without hesitation. Orochimaru's lips curled into a grin. The idea was tantalizing. If genetics truly held such potential, this system was a treasure trove waiting to be unlocked. All right, tell me how to proceed. With that, Orochimaru began adjusting to his new reality, embracing his identity as Orochimaru in this world. His life in his previous world was a closed chapter. In his former life, he had been an ordinary college student, kind-hearted, decent, yet unremarkable. His mother had been his anchor after the loss of his father, and their simple life had been filled with the small joys of companionship, hobbies, and love. But fate had been cruel. One night, as he was out buying necessities, he was knocked unconscious by an unknown assailant. When he awoke, he found himself in a nightmare. A dead girl lay beside him, a bloody dagger in his hand, and every shred of evidence pointed to him as the killer. The trial that followed was swift, and the verdict, 15 years in prison, was inevitable. His mother, convinced of his innocence, fought tirelessly to clear his name. But tragedy struck again when she died in a car accident, leaving him alone and bitter. The settlement money meant nothing to him. The world had taken everything from him, and he realized the hard truth: without power, justice was an illusion. Years in prison hardened him, and by the time he was reincarnated, he had vowed to live without mercy. Strength and status would be his guiding principles. And now, in the body of Orochimaru, one of the most brilliant minds in the Naruto world, he had a chance to rewrite his destiny. The system interrupted his thoughts. The system has prepared a starter gift package for the host. Would you like to open it? Of course, there's always a starter gift package, Orochimaru thought, smirking. Open it. Congratulations, host, you've received 6 invisible flies. Congratulations, host, you've received 1 matching pair of invisible fly contact lenses. Congratulations, host, you've received 1 vial of basic genetic enhancement serum. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow as the items appeared in the system's inventory, ready for use. The invisible flies were reconnaissance tools, invisible to the naked eye and nearly undetectable, even by sensory ninjas. Paired with the contact lenses, they offered an unparalleled surveillance advantage, with a range of up to 5 kilometers. Not bad, Orochimaru thought. Such tools would undoubtedly prove invaluable in the future. Next, he examined the basic gene enhancement serum. This serum, does it strengthen the body? Orochimaru's grin widened as he realized its potential. Does this mean it can increase chakra reserves? Yes, host, the system confirmed. The basic gene enhancement serum enhances physical capabilities, including chakra reserves. Orochimaru's excitement grew. Though only 6 years old, his talent for ninjutsu was undeniable. With this serum, he could amplify his growth, laying a foundation far beyond that of any ordinary ninja. Chapter 3, he knew that in the world of Naruto, a ninja's power came from chakra and energy formed by the perfect fusion of life energy and spiritual energy. Let's set spiritual energy aside for now. First, let's talk about life energy. Life energy generally referred to a person's physical constitution. The stronger a person's body, the more chakra they could generate, and the faster they could recover after using techniques, both of which were massive advantages in combat. Take, for example, the Senju and Uzumaki clans in this world. Due to their naturally robust bodies, even children from these clans had more chakra than the average ninja. This meant they could spam powerful techniques in battle without worrying about running out of chakra. How could an ordinary ninja ever compete with that? So, after seeing the instructions for using the basic gene enhancement serum, Orochimaru quickly understood its function, and he found himself growing a bit more interested in the system. In this world, for ordinary ninjas, there were very few ways to drastically increase their chakra reserves. Aside from becoming a Jinchuriki, the only viable option was to transplant cells from the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. But this system could accomplish something similar, enhancing a ninja's chakra reserves with just a vial of the basic genetic enhancement serum. That was nothing short of miraculous. After a brief period of reflection, Orochimaru had more or less figured it out. So, I get it now. Besides the free newbie gift pack, I'll have to research future technological products on my own, right? Orochimaru asked, already familiar with the standard process of systems from the countless novels he'd read. Yes, host, the system replied dutifully. Well, just the fact that I got a second chance at life is a jackpot already, Orochimaru muttered to himself, starting to come to terms with his situation. Alright, let's take a look at my status panel first. The system responded immediately, and the status panel appeared before him. Host, Orochimaru. Mastered technology, none. Unlockable technology, basic gene enhancement serum production program. Next unlockable stage, gene extraction. The extremely simple system interface allowed Orochimaru to quickly grasp the details. The system's research was divided into two major categories: genes and weapons. Genes, of course, pertain to the various genetic enhancements and modifications a person could make to their body cells, bloodlines, physical constitution, and overall genetic makeup. Weapons, on the other hand, referred to modern offensive technologies that could be used in battle. For example, the system hinted at advanced creations like Mecha Naruto or the small rockets and heat-seeking missiles that Pain had used during his assault on Konoha. For now, only these categories were visible. Many other technologies remained locked, but they would be revealed as Orochimaru completed his research. Once the first scientific research project was completed, the next project would unlock automatically. Interestingly, based on Orochimaru's thought process, the system had automatically prioritized genetic research projects first. Once 3 genetic experiments were successfully completed, the system would unlock the next stage: weapon research. Additionally, the system featured a mall filled with various auxiliary technological products like invisible flies, genetic analyzers, mineral detectors, smart mining machines, and more. These products could be obtained using technology points, which were earned by completing scientific research projects. For example, successfully completing the basic gene enhancement serum experiment would grant 5,000 technology points, while a smart mining machine only cost 1,000 technology points. Alright, let's unlock the basic genetic enhancement serum production program. Ding! Basic gene enhancement serum production program has been successfully unlocked. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the basic gene enhancement serum production process. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the right to use raw materials for the basic gene enhancement serum. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the main experimental equipment for the basic gene enhancement serum. Note: completing a successful scientific research project will automatically unlock the next research project: gene extraction. Gene extraction: extract genes from any species through scientific methods. Suddenly, countless experimental techniques and methods flooded Orochimaru's mind. The system had embedded the knowledge directly into his brain. He now knew everything he needed to create the basic gene enhancement serum, step by step. Meanwhile, his system warehouse was stocked with several key pieces of experimental equipment, including microscopes, DNA extraction machines, and DNA quality control machines. Next to the warehouse, there was also a button to receive a free set of raw materials. Orochimaru wasn't in a rush to claim them just yet, but he noted that the materials included various plants and herbs, some of which he recognized from this world, while others seemed completely foreign to him. His status panel had also been updated. Mastered Technology: Basic Gene Enhancement Serum. Unlockable Technology: None. Next unlockable stage: Gene Extraction. Seeing all this new information, Orochimaru quickly dived into planning his research. According to the system, each time he unlocked a new scientific research skill, he would receive a corresponding set of raw materials and experimental equipment for free. However, there was a catch: there was only one set of equipment and raw materials per project, so he needed to be precise and careful with his experiments. If he failed, he would have to earn technology points by completing smaller tasks to purchase more materials. And if he succeeded, he would move on to even more advanced projects. They just pour the theory into your brain and expect you to practice on your own? Haha, this is going to be interesting. Chapter 4: Class is starting. Class is starting. While Orochimaru was deep in thought, immersed in his mental conversation with the system, a ninja wearing a Chunin vest and bandages wrapped around his legs walked into the classroom, signaling the start of the day's lesson. This was Aizawa-sensei, the homeroom teacher for Orochimaru's class. Students, open your textbooks. Today, we'll be discussing the application of the transformation jutsu. Hearing Aizawa-sensei's voice, Orochimaru snapped back to reality, reminding himself that this was Naruto's world, not a science fiction universe where technological marvels reign supreme. For a moment, he had almost confused the two worlds, his new reality melding with the strange technology from the system. Orochimaru quickly calmed himself, deciding to temporarily push aside his thoughts about the system and focus on the class. But it didn't take long, only about 10 minutes into the lecture, before he found himself zoning out again. It wasn't because he couldn't understand the material, it was quite the opposite. Orochimaru already knew all of this far too well. The basic teachings at the Ninja Academy felt second nature to him, as if they had always been part of his consciousness. The application of the three basic techniques, the clone jutsu, the substitution jutsu, and the transformation jutsu, were all ingrained in him, fresh in his mind as though he had been practicing them for years. It seems I've fully inherited all of Orochimaru's abilities, he thought, reflecting on the knowledge and memories that had seamlessly become his own. The Ninja Academy primarily taught basic knowledge, things like chakra extraction, the three fundamental jutsu, and theoretical lessons on ninja combat. But for someone like Orochimaru, who had inherited both talent and knowledge, this was all rudimentary. His parents, though deceased, had been powerful ninjas in their time, leaving him a solid foundation to build upon. The only obstacle right now was his age. At 6 years old, his chakra reserves were naturally limited, making it difficult to perform higher-level techniques. He was reminded of Sasuke Uchiha from the original series, who could perform the fireball jutsu at 12, something that even Kakashi had found impressive. However, 6-year-old Orochimaru's chakra levels were about average compared to his peers. But now, with his enhanced memories and the potential of the mad scientist system, Orochimaru knew his ceiling was much higher than that of most shinobi. Even though he hadn't fully tested the extent of his abilities yet, he was confident that he was already stronger than most jin in his age. Aizawa-sensei continued with the lecture. The transformation jutsu allows you to disguise yourself as another person or object, creating confusion for the enemy. I've already explained the principles behind this technique, so there's no need to repeat myself. He scanned the classroom, his gaze eventually settling on Orochimaru. I'll need one of you to demonstrate the transformation jutsu for the class. Most of the students in the class were 6 years old, meaning only a few had fully mastered the technique. Naturally, Aizawa-sensei turned to Orochimaru. Orochimaru-kun, would you mind giving us a demonstration? Orochimaru blinked, brought back to full attention as his name was called. He stood up from his seat, calm as always. Channeling his chakra according to the precise movements etched in his memories, he performed the hand seals and, in an instant, a puff of smoke enveloped him. When the smoke cleared, Orochimaru had perfectly transformed into Aizawa-sensei. The class erupted in awe. Wow! That looks exactly like Aizawa-sensei. As expected of Orochimaru. Yeah, he's amazing. He always gets it right. Orochimaru-kun is incredible. The children's admiration filled the room, but Orochimaru simply let out a quiet sigh of relief. It was clear now that he had indeed inherited all of Orochimaru's abilities. To be able to execute the transformation jutsu so flawlessly at his first attempt in this new life proved that he had full control over these powers. Aizawa-sensei smiled approvingly and motioned for Orochimaru to return to his seat. TCH, what's so special about that? Jiraiya muttered from the side, annoyed by the praise Orochimaru was receiving. I can do the transformation jutsu too. For some reason, Jiraiya always seemed to harbor a grudge against Orochimaru, constantly trying to challenge him, much like how Naruto would constantly try to outdo Sasuke in the future. Their rivalry was still in its early stages, but the dynamic was already forming. However, Orochimaru, with his adult mind, paid Jiraiya no attention. In fact, even the original Orochimaru hadn't cared much for Jiraiya's challenges. But now, with his newly acquired memories and a much older mentality trapped in a child's body, Orochimaru wasn't about to waste his time on trivial rivalries with a brat. He had bigger things on his mind. Though he had awakened the mad scientist system, Orochimaru knew that in the world of Naruto, personal strength was paramount. Even if he were to delve into scientific research, it would only be to further his own strength and ability. Before diving headfirst into the system's capabilities, he wanted to ensure he had fully familiarized himself with the abilities he had inherited from Orochimaru. In the original series, even without a system, Orochimaru had been the top student in his class, going on to become one of the legendary Sannin. His intellect and cunning were unmatched. Even as his body grew weaker over time, Orochimaru always found ways to survive. If Orochimaru could achieve that in the original timeline, then the current Orochimaru backed by the system would be able to do far more. Speaking of the Sannin, Orochimaru's gaze flicked across the classroom as if searching for something or rather, someone. But something felt off. Where's Tsunade? He wondered. She should be around here too, right? It took him a moment to remember the details from the original series. Tsunade didn't attend the Ninja Academy. Orochimaru realized. Tsunade was the granddaughter of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Like Konohamaru in the future, she had been privately tutored. At this point, Jiraiya hadn't even met her yet. Well, no point worrying about that now, Orochimaru murmured to himself. According to my memories, the Ninja Academy's graduation exam is in a week. With my current abilities, there's nothing here left for me to learn. A devious grin formed on his face as an idea struck him. So, why not test if this invisible fly works? The mad scientist system had gifted him a set of 6 invisible flies, each with impressive surveillance capabilities. It would be a perfect opportunity to test the tools at his disposal while the rest of the class was busy with their lesson. Orochimaru glanced at Aizawa-sensei, who had already turned his attention back to the rest of the students, instructing them on the finer details of chakra control. Seeing the opportunity, Orochimaru discreetly reached into his robe, activating one of the invisible flies. The tiny device buzzed softly as it took flight, becoming completely imperceptible to the naked eye. With a mental command, Orochimaru directed the fly toward the back of the classroom, testing its range and ability. The accompanying contact lenses, which had come with the flies, allowed him to monitor everything the flies saw as it floated through the air, scouting out the area. Chapter 5. He knew that if he wanted to make full use of his second chance at life, the system would be his most vital asset. Therefore, it was absolutely necessary to study and experiment with its capabilities as soon as possible. Discreetly, he reached under his desk, and with a simple flick of his wrist, 6 tiny mechanical flies appeared in his palm. They were no bigger than ordinary houseflies, but their true power lay in their design. Each was a piece of advanced technology granted by the system. With his teacher distracted, Orochimaru put on the matching contact lenses he had received in his starter package. Activate stealth mode, he commanded silently in his mind. The moment the thought passed, the 6 flies began to vanish from his sight, becoming completely invisible. Orochimaru could still feel their tiny, metallic bodies in his hand, but visually, they had disappeared. Just as I thought, Orochimaru whispered to himself, a sly grin forming. This is real high-tech. True invisibility, far better than the invisibility jutsu that ninjas rely on. He gave a mental order, and the 6 invisible flies silently took flight, exiting the classroom one by one. Immediately, 6 different visual perspectives appeared on Orochimaru's retinas, transmitted directly through the contact lenses. This sensation, Orochimaru thought, marveling at the clarity and smoothness of the images in his mind. It reminded him of the Rinnegan's shared vision technique. In the original Naruto series, Pain had used this ability to control his 6 paths of Pain's 6 reanimated bodies, each implanted with Rinnegan, all sharing the same field of vision. It made them nearly impossible to hit, as they could react to attacks from any direction with perfect coordination. And now, Orochimaru was replicating that same effect except, instead of corpses reanimated by a dojutsu, he was using 6 invisible mechanical flies. This kind of shared vision could be incredibly useful for reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, or even dodging attacks in battle. Feeling a growing sense of excitement at the potential of the system, Orochimaru's interest in technology skyrocketed. Even in a world that relied on chakra, this level of advanced technology had undeniable advantages. The 6 flies were likely on par, if not superior, to the bug detection abilities of the Aburame clan. More impressively, their surveillance capabilities weren't dependent on chakra, meaning they could go unnoticed by even the most skilled sensor-type ninjas. As the flies ventured further from the classroom, covering a wide range of directions, Orochimaru's vision expanded, offering him multiple viewpoints of Konoha village at once. He saw the teaching buildings of the Ninja Academy, residential houses, the hospital, the intelligence department, the armed forces department, and even the Hokage building. On the bustling streets, he noticed various members of prominent clans, Uchiha, Hyuga, Nara, and others. None of them seemed to notice the tiny, invisible scouts floating above them, capturing every detail. Amazing! Orochimaru thought, his golden eyes narrowing in satisfaction. The most remarkable feature of these flies was that they were powered by a black tech battery that absorbed ambient light. They didn't require chakra to function, which meant they could evade any chakra-based detection methods. No one in Konoha, not even the most powerful sensor ninja, would be able to detect them. However, there was one small drawback. Controlling 6 different visual feeds simultaneously was mentally taxing. It was difficult to focus on all the different perspectives at once, especially while maintaining the subtlety needed to avoid suspicion from his classmates or teachers. Still, Orochimaru mused, the potential here is undeniable. If used wisely, this technology could make me far more dangerous than anyone realizes. He understood that, like any form of scientific research, developing advanced technology required substantial resources. In the original timeline, Orochimaru had been one of the legendary Sannin and a personal disciple of the third Hokage. He had access to significant funding, equipment, and even the backing of Danzo and his secretive root organization. But right now, Orochimaru was just a 6-year-old child. He had no powerful allies, no significant income, and aside from the starter equipment provided by the system, he was practically broke. Scientific research required more than just knowledge and skill, it needed money. Even simple items like beakers, test tubes, alcohol lamps, and other basic lab tools would be costly. It's going to be a long road. Orochimaru sighed inwardly. He had the system's tools and the knowledge, but building up his research capabilities from scratch was going to take time. Still, time was something he had in abundance. He was patient. After all, power couldn't be achieved overnight. Time passed, and soon enough, school was over for the day. Orochimaru silently retrieved his scout flies, commanding them to return to his system inventory. Ignoring the chatter of his classmates, he left the academy and made his way back to his residence. His home was located in a relatively remote part of the village. It was a large house, much bigger than Naruto's humble apartment in the original series, but its size didn't reflect wealth. It had a somber atmosphere, and Orochimaru could feel the weight of the emptiness left behind by his parents' deaths. They had been powerful shinobi, but now they were gone, and he was left to fend for himself. After rummaging through various drawers and cabinets, Orochimaru managed to scrape together a mere 5,000 ryo. This is pitiful, he thought, shaking his head. And after the graduation exam in a week, I won't even be receiving the village's subsidy anymore. 5,000 ryo can't accomplish anything. I need to make money first. He paused. No, before that. I should use the basic gene enhancement serum I got from the starter package first. With a thought, he accessed his system's inventory, summoning a glass vial that resembled a small test tube. Inside the vial was a light green liquid, faintly glowing in the dim light of his room. This is real, Orochimaru thought, staring at the vial. Everything from the system, including the equipment and tools, was stored in the system's peculiar inventory known as the system warehouse. It was unique in that it could only store non-living objects, unlike the space-time abilities of Uchiha Bito, who could store living creatures in his personal dimension. However, it was far more convenient than the space scrolls most ninjas used to carry supplies. He held the vial for a moment, feeling the cool glass in his hand. This serum will strengthen my body, increase my chakra reserves. It was the perfect first step. Orochimaru was young and had time on his side, but the faster he could increase his power, the more secure his future would be. Without further hesitation, he uncorked the vial and downed the liquid in one gulp. Chapter 6. The technology tree in this world is indeed a bit crooked. While the technology level is generally primitive, you still find bagged bread, boxed milk, and other sealed foods. There are no cars or mobile phones, yet computers, natural gas, and refrigerators exist. Which factory processes the boxed milk? Are computers and refrigerators manufactured in some hidden electrical appliance factory? There are too many inconsistencies and unexplained elements about how things work here. But right now, Orochimaru wasn't concerned about such things. At this point, regardless of which world he was in, he had no family left. The only thing he could rely on, aside from himself, was this system. So, without further hesitation, he drank the bottle of the basic gene enhancement serum in one go. The serum had a faintly sweet taste, nothing unbearable or strange. After drinking it, however, Orochimaru didn't feel any immediate effects. Could this stuff be a dud? It can't be, right? No sooner had he spoken those words than a strange warmth began spreading from his stomach, gradually flowing through his entire body. There wasn't any of the pain he'd half expected. Instead, the sensation was warm and indescribably pleasant. Almost too warm. Sweat began forming on Orochimaru's white forehead, and his skin was secreting gray-black impurities at a visible speed. About 10 minutes passed before the heat finally subsided, and the secretion of black impurities stopped. Orochimaru's entire body was now covered in sticky black gunk, yet despite the mess, he felt incredibly refreshed and energized. Without wasting time, he headed straight to the bathroom to take a bath, and afterward, he felt even more revitalized. Sitting cross-legged as per the method in his memory, he began to extract chakra, checking how much more his body could store. Well, it seemed to have increased by at least 50%. His mind was clearer, too, and he could feel that both his physical and mental energies had significantly improved. What's the significance of a 50% increase in chakra? You see, although Orochimaru didn't originally have a huge amount of chakra, he definitely had more than most. For a ninja without a special bloodline, Orochimaru's chakra reserves were considered above average. He couldn't compare to people like Jiraiya or the Raikage, but his reserves were much higher than those of someone like Kakashi. And now, with this 50% increase, Orochimaru was far beyond his peers. At this age, he could easily cast 3 or 4 C-rank ninjutsu without exhausting himself. When it comes to chakra reserves, there's something important to understand. While a ninja's chakra does tend to increase as they grow older, it's primarily tied to their physical constitution. For some people, no matter how old they get, if their bodies aren't suited for it, their chakra reserves won't increase much at all. Moreover, as people age, their chakra naturally starts to decline. Look at Kakashi from the original series. Even though he grew up to become a Jonin, his chakra reserves were still no match for Naruto's, who had just graduated from the Ninja Academy. Or consider the third Hokage. In his prime, he was hailed as a god of shinobi, but by the time he was old, he could only manage a couple of shadow clones. So, it's clear your physique directly determines your chakra reserves. But back to the matter at hand. After being physically reborn through the gene-enhancing liquid, Orochimaru stood in front of the mirror in his home. The reflection showed a boy with pale skin, long flowing hair, and striking features. A strange feeling welled up inside him. He smiled slightly, and the boy in the mirror smiled back. After a moment, Orochimaru took a deep breath. Handsome, sure. But these golden, snake-like pupils are pretty unsettling, hee. Orochimaru, huh? Later that evening, Orochimaru ate 2 pieces of bread and prepared to head to the training grounds to practice some ninjutsu. After all, while he had inherited the original Orochimaru's memories, he had only used the transformation jutsu so far. He hadn't had a chance to test out any of the other jutsu. In this world, Orochimaru's parents had recently passed away. The child who had once been a normal boy had now grown cold and withdrawn. While he didn't yet have the same obsession with science that the original Orochimaru would eventually develop, strange and dark thoughts had already begun to stir in his mind. For example, why do people die? Where do they go after they die? These were questions even adults would rarely dwell on, yet Orochimaru had found himself thinking about them more and more ever since losing his parents. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Boom, boom, boom. The unexpected sound made Orochimaru, who had been about to leave to practice, frown slightly. Opening the door, he found a girl with a ponytail standing on his doorstep. She had blonde hair, a pretty face, and was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt with green shorts. The moment Orochimaru opened the door, the girl flashed a bright, innocent smile. "Hey, Orochimaru." "Tsunade?" Orochimaru's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked her up and down, quickly confirming her identity. Jiraiya hadn't met Tsunade yet, but Orochimaru had. The reason was simple: he was the top student in their class. Not only was he exceptionally talented, but he also took his studies more seriously than most of the other kids. His ninjutsu, taijutsu, and theoretical knowledge had even surpassed some of the Uchiha clan geniuses in his age group. As the archenemy of the Uchiha clan, the Senju clan's princess, Tsunade, had naturally taken notice of Orochimaru. After all, they were the same age and equally talented. Through her connections with Hiruzen Sarutobi, Tsunade had learned about Orochimaru and had sought an opportunity to get closer to him. Her goal? To compete with him, of course. Orochimaru couldn't help but think this reason was a bit ridiculous. "What's the matter? You don't seem too happy to see me," Tsunade teased, her lips curling into a playful smile. Chapter 7. In the current Senju clan, even though the first Hokage has passed away, both parents of the Tsunade are still alive. Moreover, Tsunade's younger brother, Nawaki, hasn't even been born yet. Therefore, Tsunade isn't burdened by the pessimism or sadness that will later characterize her. Instead, she's just a lively, cheerful little girl who already has a love for gambling and a bit of a violent streak. Orochimaru, calm as ever, responded to her presence with, "It's just unexpected. Come in and sit down if you want." After saying that, he turned back to his living room, nonchalantly playing with his ninja tools, paying her little mind. Tsunade, not at all bothered by Orochimaru's indifferent attitude, strolled in, her hands clasped behind her back, her little feet tapping lightly as she walked. But midway into the room, she stopped and wrinkled her nose. "Hey, Orochimaru, why does your living room smell so bad? Didn't you always like to keep things clean?" "A stray cat got in just now," Orochimaru lied smoothly, then walked to the side and opened the window to let the room air out. He knew that what Tsunade was smelling was actually the lingering odor from the impurities his body had expelled after drinking the gene-enhancing serum. But of course, there was no way he would admit to that. Hearing his response, Tsunade looked puzzled but didn't think much of it. "I see. Well, whatever. Let's not talk about that. How about we go to the training ground?" "The training ground? For what?" "Obviously for sparring," Tsunade said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "None of the other kids are any challenge for me. That's why I came to you." As the princess of the Senju clan, she had every right to be confident. Because right now in Konoha village, there were very few children of their age who could match Orochimaru's level. After all, how many regular ninjas could compare to a prodigy from the Senju clan? Jiraiya? At this point, he didn't even know who Tsunade was. Uchiha Fugaku? He was only 1 year old at this time. Hyuga Hizashi? They weren't even born yet. However, faced with Tsunade's eager request for a fight, Orochimaru wasn't particularly interested. "Maybe some other time. I have something to take care of today." "Something to take care of?" Tsunade blinked, confused. "What could be more important than improving your strength?" "No comment," Orochimaru said as he packed up his ninja tools, slung them over his shoulder, and made his way out of the house. "When you leave, make sure to close the door behind you." "Thanks." Before Tsunade could react, Orochimaru was already out the door, leaving her standing there, stunned. "What's up with him?" "Hey, wait," she called after him, but he was already long gone. Orochimaru hadn't ignored Tsunade to act cold or superior. It was because, as a reincarnator, he now had a very different mindset. In his eyes, both Jiraiya and Tsunade were still just 6-year-old children. Sure, their abilities were far beyond what adults in his previous world could manage, but to him, they were still brats. He had no real interest in sparring with them. Even though this made him seem a bit out of place in this world, Orochimaru's naturally withdrawn personality, which had become even more pronounced after his parents' deaths, meant his behavior wouldn't raise too much suspicion. Suddenly, Orochimaru's eyes narrowed, and he quickly sidestepped to the right. Several pebbles flew past where he had just been standing. Looking up, he saw 3 brats blocking his way, grinning maliciously. "Damn it, we missed," said the kid at the front, wearing a black shirt with a red and white fan, the Uchiha clan symbol emblazoned on the back. His voice was filled with frustration. The 2 kids behind him, both around the same size, were also glaring at Orochimaru with open hostility. "Is that Orochimaru?" "Hey!" He dodged pretty fast. "Yeah, didn't expect that. He looks so weak, but his reaction time isn't bad." "Weak?" Orochimaru had always looked rather thin and pale, even as a child. His naturally pale complexion and slightly gaunt appearance gave off a sickly vibe. But Orochimaru wasn't bothered by their insults. He knew better than to get riled up by people like this. In any world, when someone tries to mock you, the best way to respond isn't by defending yourself. It's by using your strength to shut them up for good. And right now. Uchiha brats, huh? Orochimaru recognized the group in front of him. The one who had first spoken was a classmate, a kid from the Uchiha clan. This boy often bullied civilian-born ninjas, relying on the reputation of the Uchiha name. According to Orochimaru's memories, this same kid had tried to pick on him 3 days ago, only to end up getting beaten. As for the 2 kids behind him, Orochimaru didn't know them, but judging by their clothes, they were also from the Uchiha clan. They also seemed to be a bit older than him. "Orochimaru, you'd better behave yourself today, or else." The lead Uchiha began to threaten. 3 against 1, is that it? Orochimaru cut him off, his voice calm. Hearing Orochimaru's interruption, the Uchiha kid's temper flared. "You bastard. Just because you're number 1 in the class, you think you're better than me? Big brothers, help me teach him a lesson." "Heh, sorry, kid," one of the older boys sneered as they rolled up their sleeves. "We don't usually bully kids younger than us, but since you mess with our cousin, we'll make an exception." In their minds, Orochimaru was just the child of a civilian ninja. They didn't feel the least bit of guilt about beating him up. But just as they were about to step forward, a loud voice suddenly called out. "Hold it right there. Do the Uchiha clan think it's okay to gang up on someone just because you have numbers on your side?" A small figure with a ponytail came running from behind them, panting heavily as she approached. "Oh? Who do we have here? The little princess of the Senju clan?" Uchiha Shu, the leader, paused for a moment, then smirked. "What? Are you going to stand up for Orochimaru?" It was none other than Tsunade, standing there with her arms crossed, her gaze sharp. Chapter 8. Although Uchiha called her princess, his tone was anything but respectful. Orochimaru knew that the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan had a long-standing feud, so it wasn't surprising that Uchiha Shu recognized Tsunade. It was well known that Konoha village was founded through the cooperation of the Uchiha and Senju clans. But beneath the surface, the 2 clans had irreconcilable differences. The Uchiha clan had fallen into decline after Uchiha Madara left the village. Later, when the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, passed away, his brother, the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama, came to power and further suppressed the Uchiha clan. Because of this, the Uchiha clan had always harbored deep dissatisfaction with the Senju-led Hokage lineage. But dissatisfaction aside, with the second Hokage still alive, the Uchiha clan had no choice but to swallow their grievances and endure. However, children didn't have the same level of restraint. So, it was normal for Uchiha Shu to be rude. "TCH, you alone aren't even worth my effort." Tsunade shot back confidently. "I just can't stand watching a bunch of you gang up on someone. What's wrong with the many bullying the few?" It's not you we're bullying, so get out of the way. Uchiha Shu retorted, his voice filled with annoyance. Although he was just a child and didn't understand the deeper grudges of his elders, he did know that Tsunade's status wasn't one to be trifled with, and he couldn't just hit her. I won't move. Hit me if you dare. Tsunade taunted, completely unfazed. You. Uchiha Shu gritted his teeth in frustration, but knowing he couldn't lay a finger on Tsunade, he turned his attention to Orochimaru instead. Orochimaru, as a man, do you really plan to hide behind a girl? That's right, it's so pathetic, one of the other boys chimed in, sneering. He's supposed to be the top of the class, but what a coward. The two brats behind Uchiha Shu jeered at Orochimaru, mocking him without any fear, even though Tsunade, the Senju princess, was standing right in front of them. These little... Tsunade's face twisted in frustration, and she was about to stand up for Orochimaru when he suddenly placed a hand on her shoulder and gently pushed her aside. Although I don't have the habit of picking on kids, I don't mind stretching my muscles a little if it's to deal with some misbehaving brats. Orochimaru wasn't the type to hold grudges against children, but the boys in front of him weren't just any kids. They were members of the Uchiha clan, known to be arrogant, entitled, and bratty. And for children like that, Orochimaru didn't mind giving them a lesson in discipline. As for whether he could beat them, Orochimaru wasn't the least bit concerned. None of the boys wore forehead protectors, which meant they weren't even genin yet. Even if they bore the Uchiha name, their strength would be limited. After hearing Orochimaru's calm response, Tsunade was taken aback. She was about to say something when Orochimaru raised two fingers in front of him. Bang! With a puff of white smoke, a figure identical to Orochimaru appeared beside him. Is that a clone? Tsunade muttered in surprise. She didn't understand why Orochimaru would use a clone at this moment. Ha! Is this the so-called strength of the top student in our class? How laughable. Uchiha Shu sneered. Exactly, one of the other Uchiha kids chimed in. Don't you know that clones are only meant to confuse enemies? What's the point of using one right in front of us without any cover? Since you're so eager to lose, we'll happily oblige. Get ready! Uchiha Shu shouted, not wasting any time. He clenched his fist and aimed a punch at Orochimaru's clone. In his mind, his two older brothers would deal with the real Orochimaru while he'd easily take care of this clone. So, without hesitation, he threw his punch. But Orochimaru's clone moved unexpectedly. This punch isn't as fast as I expected. Orochimaru thought as the clone slightly sidestepped, easily dodging the incoming blow. The clone then slowly raised its hand. Smack! With a loud slap to the back of Uchiha Shu's head, the force from his own punch sent him tumbling forward onto the ground. Damn it! What the? Uchiha Shu grumbled, but before he could finish his curse, he froze. The other two Uchiha boys, who had been about to step forward, were also stunned. This clone, it's solid, one of them stammered, wide-eyed. How is that possible? The other whispered, equally shocked. Tsunade, equally astonished, blinked in disbelief. That's not a regular clone. Is it a shadow clone? Could Orochimaru really use shadow clones? How was that possible? He was only 6 years old. At 6, does he really have enough chakra to pull that off? A series of questions swirled through everyone's minds simultaneously. Orochimaru, on the other hand, was unfazed by their reactions. To him, this was nothing remarkable. After all, in his memories, Uchiha Itachi had been able to throw shurikens with precision before the age of 4, and by 6, he was already capable of using shadow clones. In comparison, what Orochimaru had just done was hardly impressive. So, after dealing with Uchiha Shu, Orochimaru turned his gaze toward the two older boys standing behind him. He didn't say a word he didn't need to. His cold, golden, snake-like pupils were enough to convey his meaning. If you want to fight, come on. The two remaining Uchiha boys exchanged glances, then looked at Orochimaru's body and his shadow clone, both standing firm. Cold sweat began to bead on their foreheads. At this moment, they found themselves trapped between a rock and a hard place. Should they charge forward, or retreat? Fear took over. Because, as members of the Uchiha clan, they understood the difference between a regular clone and a shadow clone. At the Ninja Academy, students were taught the basics of the clone technique. But clones created through that technique were nothing more than illusions, incapable of dealing or receiving any real damage. Everyone knew this. But a shadow clone. Chapter 9. Shadow clones are completely different from ordinary clones. This jutsu creates a physical entity that can move and fight independently, with its own consciousness and a degree of resistance to attacks. Unlike ordinary clones, shadow clones can engage in advanced ninjutsu, making them versatile in both combat and strategy. Not to mention that even some chunin struggle to master the shadow clone technique, so for a 6-year-old to pull this off was remarkable. Combine that with Orochimaru's already above-average strength, and it was no wonder the Uchiha boys were left stunned. Damn, how did this happen? Uchiha Shu mumbled, still in shock. Uchiha Shu wasn't particularly weak, but he had let his guard down, and Orochimaru had capitalized on that. From the look on their faces, Orochimaru could tell exactly what these kids were thinking. Without a word, he deactivated his shadow clone, turned his back on them, and calmly walked away toward the training ground. He had no interest in dealing with people who had already given up. Why could Orochimaru use the shadow clone technique at such a young age? The answer was simple, because his parents had been ninjas. The shadow clone wasn't as restricted as the multi-shadow clone jutsu, a forbidden technique that only a handful of people could use due to its extreme chakra consumption. On the other hand, the shadow clone jutsu was relatively common. Plenty of experienced ninjas, even those specializing in traps and tactics, could master it. Thus, it made perfect sense that Orochimaru's parents would have passed this knowledge on to him. So, Orochimaru mastering it wasn't some extraordinary feat, but rather a natural consequence of his upbringing. That said, shadow clones divide the user's chakra equally between the original and the clone. Because the clone is chakra-based, it doesn't respond as well as the original body, which is why Orochimaru seldom used it. Even if he could create a shadow clone, maintaining it for too long would drain his energy quickly. When it came to chakra control, Orochimaru wasn't quite as skilled as Uchiha Itachi, who had the natural advantage of the Uchiha bloodline. After all, the Uchiha clan possessed an innate reservoir of spiritual energy even before awakening the Sharingan, giving them a natural edge in chakra manipulation compared to ordinary ninjas. However, now that Orochimaru had used the primary gene enhancement fluid, his physical and spiritual energy had both surged, allowing him to close the gap in talent. Except for the absence of the Sharingan, in every other aspect, Orochimaru was now on par with Itachi. So, there was nothing odd about him using the shadow clone technique on a whim. In his previous life, Orochimaru had often fantasized about being able to use this technique, and now that he could, he naturally wanted to try it out. As Orochimaru strode away, Tsunade, finally snapping out of her shock, ignored the Uchiha brats and chased after him. Meanwhile, atop a tall building in Konoha village, 3 armored ninjas stood on the roof, observing the scene in the streets below through the sunlight, looking dumbfounded. A shadow clone at his age? That's impressive. Sarutobi, this Orochimaru is a real prodigy, one of them said, unable to hide his amazement. Haha, it's truly remarkable. I'd never seen anyone use a shadow clone at the age of 6, another chimed in, still in awe. Among this year's students, aside from Tsunade, I'd say Orochimaru is probably the most outstanding one, right? One asked, turning to their companion. Haha, that might not necessarily be true. Hiruzen responded with a knowing smile. Yes, this was Sarutobi Hiruzen, the man who would one day become the 3rd Hokage. But right now, he was only 24, a young and promising shinobi in Konoha. Standing beside him were Uchiha Kagami and Shimura Danzo, both equally young and full of potential. Hearing the conversation, Danzo remained silent, his gaze fixed in the direction where Orochimaru had walked off, deep in thought. It was currently the 16th year of Konoha. The First Shinobi World War was still ongoing, though it had shifted from large-scale conflicts to smaller, localized battles. While Konoha was busy dealing with the war, it was also focusing on selecting and nurturing talented young ninjas at the academy. Orochimaru was one of those promising seeds. Today, Sarutobi and the others had just returned from a mission when they happened to spot Orochimaru heading out. Upon closer inspection, they saw a group of Uchiha children lying in ambush. Though Uchiha Kagami was initially a little embarrassed to see children bullying others, Shimura Danzo believed that it was natural for kids to have scuffles, and there was no need to intervene unless there was real danger. So, they decided to watch the scene play out. And what they witnessed was truly astonishing. Orochimaru, still oblivious to the fact that he had been watched from afar, continued walking, with Tsunade tailing him like a loyal follower. "Hey, why are you following me?" Orochimaru asked without turning around. Tsunade blinked, then quickly put on a nonchalant expression. "Who says I'm following you? I'm just heading to the training ground too. It's you who's following me." With that, she shamelessly put her hands behind her back and walked ahead of him, as if she were leading the way. This was the path to the training ground, after all, and she believed Orochimaru was heading there as well. She just had no idea what he planned to do once they arrived. Seeing Tsunade's antics, Orochimaru sighed inwardly. "You're still too young to even lie convincingly." Ignoring her, he continued on his way toward the training ground. 436, 437, 438. Loud, mocking voices echoed from the training ground as Orochimaru and Tsunade approached. "Haha! A kid who doesn't even know ninjutsu or jinjutsu thinks he can become a ninja? Ridiculous." "Exactly. Just give up, kid. You're not fit to be a ninja at all. Hey, cut him some slack. At least he's trying hard. What's the use of hard work if you're a loser? No matter how hard you try, a loser is still a loser. Ha ha ha." Curious, Orochimaru stepped into the training ground, followed closely by Tsunade. What they saw was a strange sight. A child about the same age as them was doing sit-ups, sweat dripping from his forehead. He wore a green jumpsuit and a red scarf, his distinctive bowl-cut hairstyle making him stand out. Surrounding him were several other kids, all of them jeering and ridiculing him. "Isn't that my guy?" "No, wait, it's my Dai." Orochimaru realized, recognizing the boy. Indeed, the child doing sit-ups was none other than Might Dai, the father of the future Might Guy, both of whom would later become legendary in their own right. Chapter 10. Now was a time of war. Children in the ninja villages entered school at the age of 5 and were eligible to take the graduation exam as early as age 6. Looking at the young boy in front of him, Orochimaru realized that Might Dai, the boy who would one day become the father of Might Guy, was probably no older than himself. In other words, he was just 5 years old and had only recently started school. "Do you know him?" Tsunade asked, noticing Orochimaru's focused expression and feeling a bit curious. "No, it's my first time seeing him," Orochimaru replied, telling a half-truth. This was, after all, the first time he had physically seen Might Dai in this world. But of course, Orochimaru's knowledge of the future told him exactly who this boy was. Might Dai, the eternal Genin, the man who would spend 20 years honing the most powerful taijutsu technique, the Eight Gates release formation. Orochimaru would never forget a man like that. But there was no need to share all this with Tsunade. For now, Might Dai was just a 5-year-old boy who had barely started his journey in the ninja world. He wasn't on Orochimaru's radar yet, and Orochimaru had no interest in exchanging taijutsu experience with a child who had yet to prove himself. Shrugging off the matter, Orochimaru made his way to the shooting range and started practicing throwing shurikens, following the technique imprinted in his memory. Even though it was his first time physically throwing shurikens in this body, it felt as natural as breathing, like an instinct he was born with. Thud, thud, thud. All 3 shurikens hit their mark, none missed. Thud! One even struck the bullseye dead center. Orochimaru smirked, pleased with himself. He was already far ahead of most of his peers. This was good. Orochimaru retrieved the shurikens and kunai from the target and began practicing again, honing his skills with repetition. Training could be monotonous, but Orochimaru found himself enjoying it. This was his first real experience getting to grips with ninja tools, after all. As expected from the top student in our class, Tsunade muttered, sitting on the grass nearby, her voice tinged with a hint of frustration. By the way, since you're already at the training ground, why don't you come spar with me for some real practice? Real combat? A taijutsu contest? I'm no match for you in taijutsu, Orochimaru replied honestly, all while continuing to throw kunai. In terms of raw physical strength and taijutsu, even in the future, Tsunade would be one of the greatest. She would eventually be strong enough to shatter Uchiha Madara's Susanoo with a single punch. How many people in the entire ninja world could do that? Even at the age of 6, her talent in taijutsu far surpassed Orochimaru's, and he had no interest in engaging her in close combat just yet. Tsunade, hearing his refusal, looked even more depressed. You won't fight me just because you think you'll lose? I remember you weren't like this before. People change, Orochimaru replied, his focus still on perfecting his kunai throws. Tsunade was speechless for a moment. Well, fine. Since you're really not interested, I won't bother you anymore. But after the graduation exam in a week, we'll be assigned to teams. Then we'll have plenty of chances to fight. Assigned to the same team? You sound so sure of that, Orochimaru remarked, his tone a little skeptical. Of course. The second Hokage is my great-uncle, Tsunade declared, puffing her chest out proudly. The current Hokage was indeed her great-uncle, Senju Tobirama. With such connections, it would be easy for her to pull some strings. If Orochimaru had been a lesser ninja, it might have been more difficult to justify putting them on the same team. But as a genius, he was a perfect candidate for Tsunade's ambitions. I'm telling you, it's a done deal, Tsunade said confidently. Anyway, you keep practicing. I won't disturb you anymore. Bye! She gave him a playful smile, waved, and turned to leave, muttering to herself as she walked off. He's definitely the kind of man Tsunade likes. A genius who works even harder than everyone else. She didn't try to keep her voice down, as if she wanted Orochimaru to hear her on purpose. Upon hearing her muttering, Orochimaru's eyes narrowed slightly. Teasing men at the age of 6? Kids in this world really are unnaturally precocious, Orochimaru murmured to himself with a sigh. In truth, Orochimaru wasn't surprised at all by Tsunade's straightforward attitude. According to the memories he had inherited, Tsunade had expressed her admiration for him more than once in the past. Of course, her admiration was purely for his talent. It wasn't romantic not at their age. They were just children, after all, and they didn't really understand such feelings. Their interactions were limited and superficial. But Orochimaru's soul was that of an adult, so he didn't care about these childish games. For him, the most important thing now was familiarizing himself with his abilities and improving his strength. Now that fate had granted him a second chance at life, he was determined not to waste it. He was Orochimaru now, and living the same, pitiful life as in his previous incarnation was simply not an option. If he wanted to rise above, he would need to surpass even the Orochimaru of the original timeline. His goal was simple: master his abilities as quickly as possible, graduate, and then secure the resources he needed to continue his research on the primary gene enhancement fluid. Once he made progress with that, further research would become much easier. And with his growing strength and scientific knowledge, he would climb the ranks, advancing relentlessly. Eventually, he would become so powerful that he could trample anyone who dared stand in his way. With that thought in mind, Orochimaru grabbed a kunai and continued his training with renewed vigor. He performed the hand seals quickly, his hands a blur of motion. Wind release, great breakthrough. A gust of wind shot forward, but it wasn't strong enough. The distance and cutting power were lacking, and too much chakra was wasted. Again. Wind release, great breakthrough. This time, it was better, but still not perfect. Again! Orochimaru, completely absorbed in his training, didn't notice that Tsunade hadn't gone far after all. She had hidden herself behind a pillar in the distance, watching Orochimaru silently, lost in thought. Chapter 11. Time passed swiftly as Orochimaru continued his relentless training. Before he knew it, midnight had come. Deciding to balance work and rest, Orochimaru packed up and headed home for some well-deserved sleep. The next morning, Orochimaru made his way to a local grocery store. Without hesitation, he walked in and approached the counter. 5 chakra paper strips. That'll be 500 ryo. Thanks, the fat shopkeeper replied with a friendly smile. Orochimaru handed over the banknotes without batting an eye. 500 ryo was quite a sum, each chakra test strip costing 100 ryo, but in this world, everything related to ninjas was notoriously expensive. Orochimaru was already well aware of this. For example, an ordinary shuriken cost around 300 ryo, and a kunai could set you back 1,000 ryo. Given that, a chakra paper strip costing 100 ryo was still within a reasonable range. As Orochimaru thought of ninja tools, he couldn't help but recall Tintin from the original timeline. Now that he thought about it, she was truly a wealthy person. She would casually toss around various ninja tools during battle. He couldn't fathom how a genin could afford such a vast arsenal. But today, Orochimaru's focus wasn't on ninja tools. He had come to buy chakra paper strips for a very specific reason. Anyone familiar with the world of Naruto would recognize that these strips could be used to test the elemental nature of a ninja's chakra. Chakra attributes were divided into 7 categories: fire, wind, lightning, water, earth, yin, and yang. The chakra paper, however, could only measure the first 5: fire, wind, lightning, water, and earth. The yin and yang attributes couldn't be detected by these strips. The process was simple: inject a small amount of chakra into the test strip, and depending on the reaction, the user could determine their chakra nature. Fire, the paper will ignite and turn to ash. Wind, the paper will split in 2. Lightning, the paper will wrinkle. Water, the paper will become damp. Earth, the paper will crumble. In Orochimaru's inherited memories, aside from the 3 basic jutsu, clone jutsu, substitution jutsu, and transformation jutsu, he also possessed knowledge of the shadow clone jutsu and the wind release, great breakthrough technique. However, he was unsure whether he possessed any other chakra attributes aside from wind. Testing his chakra was the first step to figuring out which elements he could wield, and in turn, plan his training accordingly. He was fully aware that in the ninja world, the 5-element ninjutsu wasn't necessarily the most practical in battle. Most elemental jutsus were medium to long-range techniques that required hand seals to perform. Given the fast pace of ninja combat, it was common for an opponent to counter your ninjutsu before you could complete the seals. However, elemental ninjutsu were like nuclear weapons in battle. They were not always used, but when your enemy employed them, you needed to be able to respond in kind. Otherwise, you would be at a significant disadvantage. For now, Orochimaru thought it wise to master the basics of the 5-element ninjutsu before delving into the more advanced snake-related jutsus he would eventually develop. He found a quiet spot in the village and, with the chakra test strips in hand, prepared to determine his chakra nature. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office of Konoha village, the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama, was engrossed in handling military affairs. His silver hair and piercing red eyes gave him a formidable presence, and he wore the traditional robes befitting his esteemed position. Standing respectfully before him were Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo, both dressed in their black combat uniforms. "You two performed admirably on this last mission," the second Hokage said, his voice stern but approving. "The sniper mission was a success, and the pressure on the border has eased significantly. I expect a period of truce to follow." Tobirama paused, his expression softening slightly. "You don't need to take on any more missions for now. Stay in the village. The academy will be holding graduation exams soon, and you'll both serve as mentor jonin for the new graduates." "Yes, sensei." Hiruzen and Danzo replied in unison, bowing slightly. Despite Danzo's usual manipulative and scheming nature, he had nothing but respect for Tobirama. It wasn't just because Tobirama was their teacher, but also because of his ruthless and iron-blooded methods. The second Hokage was not a man to be trifled with. Just as Tobirama was about to continue speaking, the door to the office burst open, and a little girl came skipping inside. "Uncle! Uncle! Oh, hey, Teacher Sarutobi, you're here too?" the girl chirped. The second Hokage's brow furrowed slightly. "Tsunade? What are you doing here?" "Hee, I came to tell you something important." "And what's that?" "After the graduation exam, I want to be on the same team as Orochimaru," Tsunade declared, her voice full of enthusiasm. "Orochimaru?" Tobirama repeated, his expression one of mild confusion. "Who's that?" At this point, Orochimaru had only just begun to show his talents, and Tobirama, as the Hokage, hadn't yet had the opportunity to notice him. He didn't pay much attention to the civilian-born ninjas. "He's a genius," Tsunade answered proudly. "Genius, you say?" Tobirama mused for a moment before responding calmly. "If you think he's a genius, then he must be special." Tobirama had watched Tsunade grow up, and although she had her shortcomings, he knew she was no fool. Her standards were high, and for her to recognize someone's talent meant that person was indeed remarkable. "Of course," Tsunade boasted, her eyes gleaming. "Not only does he have perfect scores in all his basic courses, but just yesterday, he performed a shadow clone jutsu. That alone qualifies him as a top-tier genius, right?" Tobirama's usually stoic face showed a rare glimmer of surprise. "He can use the shadow clone jutsu? And he hasn't even graduated yet?" "We witnessed it ourselves yesterday," Hiruzen added, stepping forward. "Orochimaru truly is an exceptional child." In truth, Sarutobi Hiruzen had already planned to recommend Orochimaru for special training even before Tsunade's request. Now, it just seemed things were happening a little sooner than expected. Tobirama stroked his chin thoughtfully. "I see. So you've had your eye on him for a while?" "Yes, sensei," Hiruzen confirmed. "Interesting," Tobirama muttered. "It sounds like this boy is something else." "So, uncle, does that mean you'll agree to put us on the same team?" Tsunade asked eagerly. "There's no reason to say no," Tobirama answered with a small smile. "Yay! Long live Uncle!" Tsunade cheered, jumping up and down in excitement. Chapter 12. Orochimaru had no idea what was happening in the Hokage's office, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't care. He was confident that, without any intervention, he would inevitably become Sarutobi Hiruzen's disciple. This was a certainty in his mind. Nothing would change that outcome. He stared at the chakra testing paper in his hand, lost in thought. After the test, Orochimaru noticed that his current self didn't seem to have all the chakra attributes that he recalled possessing in the future. Wind, earth, and water were the only ones that appeared in the test. From this, he speculated that perhaps the reason his future self had all the elemental attributes was because of his later body modifications. However, Orochimaru wasn't sure, and since he couldn't figure it out at the moment, he decided to stop thinking about it. He had never been the type to dwell on problems without clear answers. Taking a deep breath, he looked up at the sky. "If I want to quickly improve my strength, aside from relying on family bloodline limit, the fastest way would be to become a Jinchuriki," Orochimaru mused. But becoming a Jinchuriki wasn't something he could think about for now. With his current abilities, it was a pointless thought. As for family bloodline limit? Perhaps that was a direction worth pursuing. In other words, should he start conducting experiments right away? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the right path to take. But then, he remembered something else: he didn't have enough money. Based on his calculations, purchasing the scattered equipment necessary for his initial experiments would cost at least several 100,000 ryo. Hundreds of thousands of ryo were an astronomical amount for someone like him right now. A genin like Orochimaru could only take on D-rank missions, and the pay for those missions ranged from 5,000 to 10,000 ryo. The payment would then be split among team members. After getting his share, Orochimaru would only have around 2 to 3,000 ryo for himself. After covering daily expenses, how many months would it take to save up enough for his experiments? His eyes narrowed slightly. He had never expected that in this world, where strength was the ultimate measure, he would be troubled by something as mundane as money. He had briefly considered selling the enhancement serum he'd received from the system, which could increase chakra by 50%. That would surely fetch a high price. But after some thought, he realized that selling the serum was far too risky. Not only was he unsure if the liquid actually worked on others, but even if it did, how could he explain where it came from? The ninjas of Konoha were no fools. They would likely interrogate him until they forced the truth out, and how would he handle that? He certainly didn't want to go from being the experimenter to becoming the subject of experiments. No, it was better to take things one step at a time. For now, his focus should be on passing the graduation exam and using the time afterward to familiarize himself with the experimental process. With this in mind, Orochimaru returned to his residence and began simulating experiments using the knowledge stored in his mind. School? Who even bothers going to school in person these days? If you don't rely on a shadow clone to learn, can you really call yourself a genius? Throughout the entire Naruto series, only Uchiha Itachi had mastered the art of learning through shadow clones. Even Kakashi, who was also considered a genius, still went to school in person. When Kakashi took the graduation exam at the age of 5, he could already use the forbidden technique to create multiple clones. But the reason he still went to school in the flesh was because he couldn't control his chakra well enough to maintain a clone for an entire day. Uchiha Itachi had achieved it, and now, Orochimaru had too. Time passed quickly, and before he knew it, 7 days had gone by. During that time, Orochimaru not only consolidated his abilities but also absorbed the information provided by the system. Now, everything was ready, and all he needed was the right opportunity. During these 7 days, he also discovered something extraordinary. The surveillance flies given to him by the system could record the process of other ninjas casting jutsu through their electronic eyes. The recorded footage could even be played back in slow motion, which made it easier for him to analyze and learn those techniques. It was like having 6 extra Sharingan at his disposal. Thanks to these recorded images, combined with his natural talent and the knowledge inherited from his parents, Orochimaru learned a great deal of ninjutsu in just 1 week. He had already mastered a variety of techniques, including the water wave, earth clone, earth mud wall, and wind blade. Even though he knew that these basic techniques weren't particularly impressive, they were still better than nothing. Finally, the day of the graduation exam arrived. The exam involved the 3 basic techniques: substitution jutsu, transformation jutsu, and clone jutsu, as well as shuriken throwing. The rules were simple enough, and Orochimaru, for once, appeared in person to take the test. "Alright, today is the graduation exam," announced Chunin Aizawa, holding a list in his hand. "When I call your name, come up to the podium." "Hirata." "Present." "Kenta." "Here." "Kenichi." "Present." As the names were called, students walked up to the podium one by one. Since everyone in the class was only around 6 years old, very few were actually expected to graduate. Next up, Jiraiya. The moment Jiraiya's name was called, he jumped up from his seat like he had been injected with adrenaline. "Orochimaru, watch closely. You're about to witness your future master Jiraiya graduate with flying colors." "Haha." With an air of bravado, Jiraiya swaggered up to the podium and effortlessly demonstrated his mastery of the 3 basic techniques. His proficiency immediately drew gasps of surprise from the students in the audience. "Wow! Jiraiya's amazing. Who knew he was hiding this much skill? Mastering the 3 basic techniques after just 1 year at the academy? That's some serious talent." Even Aizawa couldn't help but nod in approval. Jiraiya was one of the few students who had the potential to pass the exam. Chapter 13. Yes, Jiraiya had indeed graduated successfully. Although Jiraiya, like Naruto in his youth, was a bit nervous and excited, he was by no means a failure. The reason Naruto seemed like a loser in the original story wasn't due to a lack of talent. Rather, it was because he had the Nine Tails, the QB, sealed within him, which disrupted his ability to control his chakra properly. But Jiraiya was different. There was no QB sealed inside him, and his natural talent wasn't bad. While he couldn't compare to geniuses like Orochimaru or Tsunade, Jiraiya was far above the average student in his class. He fell into that category of being better than most, but not quite at the top level. Otherwise, how could he have graduated at the age of 6 and caught the attention of none other than Sarutobi Hiruzen? What's that you say? Konoha traditionally pairs the top student with the worst one to balance the teams? That's nonsense. That reasoning might apply to other teams, but when it comes to the legendary trio of Sannin? Absolutely not. Even in times of war, anyone who graduates from the Ninja Academy at the age of 6 is considered an undeniable genius. The fact that Jiraiya graduated alongside Orochimaru at just 6 years old spoke volumes about his potential. But back to the story at hand. Standing on the podium, after showing off his mastery of ninjutsu, Jiraiya proudly raised his chin toward Orochimaru, his provocation obvious. And then, it was Orochimaru's turn. With a series of loud bangs, four shadow clones suddenly appeared in the classroom. Instantly, the entire room fell silent. Jiraiya's smug expression was wiped clean as his eyes widened in confusion and disbelief. What the hell? Even Aizawa, the teacher, was left momentarily speechless. A civilian-born ninja could summon 4 shadow clones at the age of 6? How was that even possible? Aizawa, who was in his 20s and already a chunin, felt utterly embarrassed. However, Orochimaru had shown extraordinary potential since the moment he entered the academy, so even though Aizawa was shocked, it wasn't entirely outside of his expectations. After all, Orochimaru had always been a genius. Amazing. Aizawa muttered before addressing the two. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, you two head to the training ground and wait for Lord Hiruzen. Jiraiya, still trying to make sense of what just happened, raised his hand. Teacher, aren't we supposed to be divided into teams? After all, apart from him and Orochimaru, there were other students graduating today, including Uchiha Shu and a few others. Normally, the teacher would create 3-person teams based on their abilities. There's no need for that, Aizawa responded curtly. Why not? Jiraiya persisted, clearly confused. You'll understand when you get there, Aizawa said dismissively. Truth be told, he didn't know the specific reason either. This was a directive from higher up, and he was simply following orders. Okay. Jiraiya replied, still puzzled, but as he saw Orochimaru already walking away, he hurried after him. Hey, Orochimaru, wait up, he called, running after him. At the training grounds, Orochimaru stood in silence, a rare look of anticipation on his face. Finally, he thought, he could start taking missions and earn some money. In this world where strength was everything, money was still crucial. Without it, even the strongest ninja couldn't conduct research or fund their ambitions. As Orochimaru reflected on his next steps, Jiraiya, as usual, was chattering away beside him. Hey, Orochimaru, did you notice that girl back there? Do you think she was looking at me? Hey! Are you even listening? Come on, I'm asking you something. Seriously, man, you're no fun. Well, anyway, I bet she was definitely checking me out. I mean, who wouldn't? I'm Lord Jiraiya. I'm suave, handsome, and adored by all the girls. It'd be weird if she wasn't staring at me. Jiraiya boasted, clearly more interested in girls than anything else. Orochimaru, for his part, paid no attention to him. Instead, he pondered how Jiraiya could be such a chatterbox at 6 years old. And not just a chatterbox, a pervert too. What kind of 6-year-old walks down the street, ogling women? One minute, Jiraiya was pointing out a girl's legs, and the next, he was commenting on another's figure. Orochimaru found it baffling. How could someone so young be so obsessed with women? What could he possibly do at this age? Could he even react? Orochimaru's thoughts were interrupted when a figure suddenly appeared in front of them: Hiruzen Sarutobi, their new teacher. With a smile, Hiruzen greeted them warmly. Well, you two have been waiting patiently. My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi, and from today onwards, I'll be your Jounin instructor. But before we get started, why don't we introduce ourselves? Jiraiya's eyes sparkled with excitement as he immediately jumped at the opportunity to speak first. My name is Jiraiya, and my dream is... Once Jiraiya finished his introduction, Orochimaru casually said his name, offering little else. Hiruzen looked at Orochimaru and nodded approvingly. He was just about to say something when a cheerful voice called out from the distance. Sarutobi-sensei. It was Tsunade, approaching them with a bright, energetic aura. Upon seeing her, Jiraiya's eyes lit up like a predator spotting its prey. This is Tsunade, Hiruzen explained. She'll be the third member of your team. I'm sure you already know her, Orochimaru. Orochimaru simply nodded. He wasn't surprised to see Tsunade, whether in his memories or in reality, she was always destined to be on the same team as him. Jiraiya, on the other hand, didn't know this. The moment he saw Tsunade, his face beamed with excitement. In an instant, he rushed over to her like a cat catching the scent of fish. Oh, Tsunade! I'm Jiraiya! It's so great to finally meet you. Please take care of me. And, if you have any love letters, feel free to give them to me later. Jiraiya said with a mischievous grin. Tsunade, raising an eyebrow, clenched her fist. Before Jiraiya could process what was happening, she swung at him with all her might. Don't joke around with me like that, she shouted. Bang! Jiraiya flew through the air, crashing several meters away. That punch was Tsunade's special welcome gift for him. Orochimaru watched the scene unfold and was quietly impressed by Tsunade's raw strength. He had known from his memories that she possessed monstrous physical power, but seeing it in action at such a young age was still shocking. Tsunade was only 6 years old, and yet she had just sent Jiraiya, who was bigger than her, flying with a single punch. Incredible! Chapter 14. Jiraiya came back with a swollen face, and Orochimaru shot a quick glance at the two of them. As expected, I'm an adult now. I can't play these childish games with them anymore, Orochimaru thought. Compared to this lively, chaotic scene, he much preferred being alone. He couldn't quite tell whether this was his original personality or if it was influenced by the original Orochimaru's demeanor. Damn it, girl! What kind of monster are you? Jiraiya grumbled, rubbing his swollen face, clearly irritated. Humph. Tsunade responded with a dismissive snort. All right, let's not escalate things any further, Hiruzen interjected, stepping in to settle the matter. This is your first day getting to know each other, and you'll be working together for a long time, so let's focus on building your friendship. Hiruzen's authoritative tone immediately diffused the situation. We're all meeting for the first time today, and I need to get a sense of your abilities, Hiruzen continued once the dust had settled. He then pulled out 2 small bells from his pouch. These bells are key to your task. You'll need to snatch these 2 bells from me, he explained, holding them up for everyone to see. Seeing the bells and hearing the explanation, Orochimaru's eyes narrowed slightly. So, the legendary Sannin were tested with the same bell exercise back then? 2 bells? Orochimaru said calmly. That means... Yes, Hiruzen confirmed, smiling slightly. Someone will be left without a bell and won't get lunch. Not only that, but they'll be tied to the wooden stakes over there and will have to watch the others eat. So it was indeed the bell test. Perfect, Orochimaru thought. This will be a good opportunity to test the fruits of my training over the past few days. Next to him, Jiraiya's mischievous grin returned. He quickly turned to Tsunade, full of excitement. Hey, Tsunade, how about this? If I grab one of the bells, will you go on a date with me? Tsunade didn't even hesitate. If you don't get a bell, you'd better stay far far away from me," she replied nonchalantly, knowing full well Jiraiya didn't stand a chance. Jiraiya's grin widened even more. "Alright, it's a deal." His confidence was sky-high, not like Naruto or Obito, who had bravado but hid insecurity underneath. Jiraiya was genuinely convinced of his own strength. Hiruzen, observing Jiraiya's enthusiastic attitude, couldn't help but chuckle. "Alright then. I'll turn around and count to 10. When I'm done, be prepared to fight. The clock starts now." With that, Hiruzen tied the bells to his waist and turned around. Whoosh! In an instant, all three of them vanished from sight. Orochimaru quickly found a hiding spot, his mind racing. He knew that ever since he transmigrated into this world, everything had changed. He couldn't rely solely on his knowledge of the Naruto storyline because his very presence could create unpredictable butterfly effects. He needed to adapt to the current situation and form his own judgments, rather than blindly relying on memory. He barely even remembered how Naruto's Team 7 originally passed the bell test, much less how the future Sannin did it. But one thing he did know: Hiruzen was incredibly powerful. Ridiculously so. If they wanted to seize the bells, they'd have to outsmart him. With that in mind, Orochimaru flicked his wrist, sending a small fly-shaped surveillance drone into the air. Soon, Hiruzen's every move appeared in Orochimaru's vision. "Jiraiya, that idiot," Orochimaru muttered under his breath. In the middle of the training field, Jiraiya had already fallen for one of Hiruzen's most basic traps. He was hanging upside down from a tree, flailing helplessly. How unreliable, Orochimaru thought. He may have graduated, but he's still hopelessly impulsive. His theoretical knowledge is clearly lacking too. Forget it, he's a lost cause. Shifting his gaze, Orochimaru noticed Tsunade hidden in the grass some distance away. After a brief moment of thought, he gestured towards her. Tsunade blinked in surprise but quickly nodded in understanding. Even though they hadn't fought together before, Orochimaru's hand signals were simple and clear. He was indicating that he would initiate the first move, and Tsunade should wait for the right moment to strike. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two shurikens sliced through the air, heading straight for Hiruzen. Orochimaru's initial plan was to discuss a proper strategy with the other two and work together for a coordinated 3-versus-1 assault on their teacher. But with Jiraiya caught so easily, only two of them were left to execute any plan. The shurikens Orochimaru threw, however, were effortlessly dodged by Hiruzen. Without even turning around. "An attack like that won't work on me," Hiruzen teased with a smile. But just as the words left his mouth, water release, water wave. A sudden torrent of water surged toward Hiruzen. Orochimaru had followed up the shuriken attack with a water jutsu. "Oh? You've already mastered water release on your own? Impressive." Hiruzen praised, deftly evading the wave with a series of nimble somersaults, his movements as fluid and agile as a monkey's. Even as he complimented Orochimaru, he remained one step ahead. Just as he was about to make another comment, his eyes widened in sudden alarm. He had sensed something. Whoosh! A razor-sharp wind blade sliced through the air, striking him dead on. In an instant, Hiruzen was cut clean in half. Jiraiya, still hanging upside down from the tree, was frozen in shock. Sarutobi-sensei was killed. Is this a joke? Tsunade, who had been crouched in the grass and ready to attack, was equally stunned. She had just watched Orochimaru create a shadow clone, use water release as a distraction, and then circle around to flank Hiruzen. The clone had drawn Hiruzen's attention with the shuriken and water jutsu, while Orochimaru's real body took advantage of the opening to unleash wind release, a jutsu with powerful cutting force. Chapter 15. Except for Orochimaru, Tsunade and Jiraiya were just as surprised at first. However, they soon breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Hiruzen who had been sliced in half gradually lost his original appearance, his body transforming into two lumps of dirt at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, Orochimaru's brows furrowed in frustration. As expected, it was an Earth clone. He knew Hiruzen wouldn't be defeated by such a basic ninjutsu, but what puzzled him was when Hiruzen had even cast the clone jutsu. In memory, Orochimaru had seen many battles where it seemed like the enemy captured was a real person, only for it to turn out to be a clone. However, those battles were part of a story, and such instances were rare in reality. In a real battle, you'd usually notice something wrong if an opponent was a clone. Did I miss a detail? Orochimaru wondered. Did Hiruzen use the Earth clone when he first appeared or when he hid his real body somewhere? Amazing. You managed to defeat my clone. Hiruzen's voice came from the nearby woods as he emerged calmly. Looking at the two Orochimarus, his real body and the shadow clone, Hiruzen couldn't help but show approval. Orochimaru, you've really surprised me. Your clones can release ninjutsu too? Hiruzen was genuinely impressed. The basic principle of shadow clones was that they equally divided the user's chakra. For an average 6-year-old child, having enough chakra to fight and cast jutsu was already impressive, let alone having a clone that could cast jutsu without dispelling afterward. For Orochimaru's clone to release multiple ninjutsu and remain intact was evidence of an unusually high chakra capacity. This is nothing, Orochimaru replied with narrowed eyes, and it's not over yet. Without wasting another moment, Orochimaru dashed forward, channeling wind chakra into his movements. Though wind chakra didn't directly increase a ninja's speed, it could reduce the caster's weight by a special release method, making them faster in a roundabout way. This was an innate skill Orochimaru had gained, so it wasn't surprising to him. However, given that he was only 6 years old, the boost in speed wasn't enough to create a lethal threat to Hiruzen, neither in terms of speed nor strength. Fortunately, thanks to the enhancements from the basic genetic serum, Orochimaru's mental fortitude had increased significantly. As he engaged Hiruzen in close combat, his reaction speed was just barely able to keep up with his teacher's swift fists and kicks. Punch, dodge, kick. Every movement looked precise and skilled. Wow, so strong. Jiraiya, still hanging upside down from the tree, watched in awe. He couldn't even articulate his thoughts properly, his eyes wide as he observed the taijutsu battle between Orochimaru and Hiruzen. The saying "there's no harm in comparison" rang true. Watching Orochimaru now, Jiraiya couldn't help but feel embarrassed at his own earlier blunder. He was filled with jealousy, watching Orochimaru's fluid movements, while he himself had been humiliated by such a simple trap. He's become much better at taijutsu, hasn't he? Tsunade, who was hiding in the grass, was also impressed. She had known Orochimaru for a while and could clearly see how much he had improved. The strength isn't bad, and the speed isn't slow either. Hiruzen praised once more as he blocked Orochimaru's punch. But you can't do it alone. Before Hiruzen could finish, a loud boom echoed across the training ground, shaking the air. Hiruzen quickly parried Orochimaru's attack and did 2 quick somersaults to dodge the explosion. Before he could react further. "It's now," a voice whispered from the grass. Whoosh! A figure darted out from the grass near Hiruzen, moving swiftly toward him. Ding! Ding! 2 crisp sounds rang out as the bells tied to Hiruzen's waist were snatched away. Hee hee, Hiruzen-sensei. Tsunade grinned, standing before him with the 2 bells in hand. The battle was over. Oh! Hiruzen was momentarily stunned before bursting into laughter. Ha ha ha! Well done! You two worked together perfectly. Although Hiruzen had held back significantly during the fight, the fact that 2 6-year-olds had managed to cooperate so seamlessly and execute such a successful strategy was proof of their exceptional talent. Especially Orochimaru. Thinking of this, Hiruzen turned to Orochimaru. But tell me, Orochimaru, where did you learn these techniques? Yeah. How did you come up with the idea of attaching the explosive tag to your clone? Tsunade chimed in, full of admiration. Earlier, while Orochimaru and Hiruzen were locked in close combat, it had seemed as if Hiruzen had the upper hand. But just as the fight reached its climax, Orochimaru's shadow clone had rushed in. Tsunade had expected it to be destroyed immediately, but to her surprise, it self-destructed instead, using the explosion to create an opening. The angle of the explosion was perfect, forcing Hiruzen to dodge away right into her path, allowing her to grab the bells. The precision and planning behind it were undeniable. Without that perfectly timed explosion, they wouldn't have won. I just imagined it, Orochimaru replied nonchalantly, not wanting to explain too much. Though in truth, he had copied Uchiha Itachi's clone explosion technique from his previous life's memory. Itachi wasn't even born yet. Technically, Orochimaru wasn't lying. Imagined it, huh? Ha ha. You're quite the genius. Hiruzen laughed heartily, clearly impressed. You've just graduated, and you're already using explosive tags so cleverly. Very good, very good. Hiruzen was clearly pleased with Orochimaru's talent. Jiraiya, on the other hand, wasn't having such a good time. He had been tied to the wooden stake, looking pitiful as Tsunade mocked him mercilessly. Despite it being their first day together, Jiraiya and Tsunade were already bickering. Jiraiya shouted insults like flat-chested, airport, and washboard, while Tsunade fired back with pervert and loser. Hiruzen, standing to the side, tried to calm things down. All right, that's enough. Tsunade, you and Orochimaru head home for now. I'll have a talk with Jiraiya. Just as Tsunade and Orochimaru turned to leave, Orochimaru suddenly asked, Teacher, when can we start taking missions? Hiruzen blinked, a bit surprised. There's no rush for that. Today's test is enough for now. We'll discuss missions tomorrow. All right, Orochimaru replied with a nod, turning to leave. Whether it was one day earlier or later didn't make much difference to him. As they walked away, Tsunade suddenly stopped in her tracks, curious. Hey, Orochimaru, you seem really eager to start missions. Why? Money. Tsunade blinked. Money? Are you short on cash? Yes. Seriously? Yes, Orochimaru said bluntly, leaving Tsunade speechless as they continued walking. All Orochimaru could think about was how missions would bring him money, and how money would enable him to fund his experiments. His priorities were crystal clear. For him, the path forward was simple: make money, do experiments, and grow stronger. Chapter 16. As Tsunade walked away, Orochimaru's earlier conversation with her still echoed in his mind. I thought it would be a lot, Tsunade had said casually. It's only 150,000 ryo. Just wait, I'll go back and get it for you. Sure enough, a wealthy family is a wealthy family, Orochimaru mused. For most genin, 150,000 ryo was an astronomical amount of money. Even Chunin had to risk their lives on many dangerous missions to accumulate such a sum. Yet, Tsunade, without batting an eye, offered it to him like it was pocket change. Even though she emphasized that it was a loan, the fact that a mere child could hand over that much money so casually spoke volumes about the financial strength of the Senju clan. To be honest, borrowing money had never crossed Orochimaru's mind. He didn't have close family or friends in this world. Besides, Tsunade was just a little girl herself. How could he, with his adult mindset, even bring himself to ask for a loan? But once the conversation had naturally veered toward money, and Tsunade had offered to lend it, he didn't hesitate to accept. After all, this would save him nearly 2 months of time, and Tsunade could be considered someone under his care now. It was a win-win situation, with neither side losing out. Half an hour later, true to her word, Tsunade returned with a thick stack of banknotes and threw them in front of Orochimaru. 1,000 ryo bills, stacked up to a total of 150,000. Well, here's 150,000 ryo. At that moment, Orochimaru felt a strange sensation, almost as if he were being pampered like some kept boy. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on him, but he still had to express his gratitude. Thanks. You're welcome, Tsunade replied nonchalantly, waving it off. With your talent, it won't take long for you to make that kind of money yourself. Orochimaru nodded, not disagreeing. It was true, although making money as a genin was slow, advancing to Chunin would open the doors to higher paying missions. And with his current abilities, advancing to Chunin was only a matter of time. After parting ways with Tsunade, Orochimaru set off to purchase the necessary experimental equipment. His home wasn't too small, and now that he lived alone, he had already cleared out space to use as a laboratory 3 days earlier. There was no concern about not having enough room for the equipment he was about to buy. Typically, setting up an ordinary laboratory would require many large machines, and the average private home wouldn't suffice for such large-scale experiments. But for the first experiment creating the basic genetic enhancement serum, the process was relatively simple. The main challenge lay in obtaining rare ingredients, while large, complex equipment wasn't needed. So, for now, Orochimaru's home would suffice. By the time Orochimaru had bought all the necessary materials, it was already evening. The streets were busy with people coming and going, but he remained focused, carrying bags of supplies and equipment back to his home. Despite the lateness of the hour, sleep was the last thing on his mind. He had gone over the experimental steps countless times in his head and couldn't wait to begin. After meticulously setting up all the equipment, Orochimaru finally began the first real experiment of his life, creating the basic gene enhancement serum. He followed the steps that were engraved in his mind, moving with precision. At first, he thought his strong theoretical knowledge would make the process simple. But reality soon proved otherwise. Alright, first, heat this herb slightly. Wait, why is it turning mushy? Let's try again. This fire seems too weak now? Okay, this time should be fine. Wait, too much material again? The harsh truth of scientific research was dawning on Orochimaru's successful experiments required countless trials and errors. Every step had to be precise. Every failure contributed to a deeper understanding of the process. Still, Orochimaru wasn't one to give up easily. He had almost memorized all the theoretical aspects, so there was no reason he couldn't figure it out with enough practice. And so, his long journey of trial and error scientific research began in earnest. Day by day, time passed. Orochimaru gradually grew more accustomed to life in Konoha village. The day after his graduation, Hiruzen Sarutobi officially gave him, Tsunade, and Jiraiya their Konoha forehead protectors. At the age of 6, they were now officially Genin. During the day, Orochimaru followed Sarutobi on D-rank and C-rank missions, learning various combat techniques and honing his skills. At night, he devoted himself to his experiments. He balanced his schedule with strict discipline, ensuring he went to bed at midnight and woke up at 7 a.m. sharp. Now that he had become Orochimaru, he had no intention of slacking off like an idle otaku. Finally, half a year later, late one night, Orochimaru stood in his dimly lit lab, holding up a test tube filled with light green liquid. A satisfied smile tugged at his lips. It should be successful this time. System, check if the serum is qualified. Ding! Beginning analysis. Testing complete. Basic gene enhancement serum, purity, 92%, exceeding the 90% standard. Final verdict, the basic gene enhancement serum has been successfully produced. Next technology available, gene extraction. Would you like to unlock it? Unlock it, Orochimaru said without hesitation. The effectiveness of the gene enhancement solution was determined by its purity. Only serum with a purity of 90% or higher could fully exert their effects. Though Orochimaru wasn't aiming for perfection 100% purity, he knew that the benefits wouldn't significantly increase past 90%, so this result was more than satisfactory. Ding! Gene extraction technology successfully unlocked. Congratulations, host, you've acquired. Another set of experimental equipment appeared in his storage, though this time there wasn't as much as during the first experiment. The new tools were small and specialized. Orochimaru checked the new scientific data. The next area of research was gene fusion. Gene fusion, the process of combining two or more genes to enhance an existing species or create a new one. Chapter 17. Gene fusion? Fusing two or more genes together? As Orochimaru pondered over the concept, his eyes narrowed slightly. This ability sounds impressive, he thought, but without diving deeper into the specifics, he couldn't yet assess its true usefulness. He spent the next 2 hours skimming through the information related to the gene extraction technique. "Well, this ability is quite interesting as well," he noted. It contained detailed methods for extracting various genes from living things. Orochimaru nodded to himself, satisfied. Exchange for the genetic detector. The exchange is successful. 1,000 technology points have been consumed. In a flash, a palm-sized gadget appeared in Orochimaru's storage. It resembled a small wireless camera, compact and easily concealable. Orochimaru glanced at his attribute panel, noticing a few changes. Host, Orochimaru. Master Technology, Basic Gene Enhancement Serum. Current Stage Technology, Gene Extraction Technique. Plant Specimens, 0 out of 100. Animal Specimens, 0 out of 100. Next Stage, Gene Fusion. Remaining Technology Points, 4,000. Equipments, Gene Detector, capable of analyzing the genetic information of any species. So, I need to extract the genes from 100 kinds of plants and 100 types of animals to complete this phase of the technology? Orochimaru muttered to himself. This shouldn't be too hard. 100 types of living organisms? Between the snakes, insects, rats, ants, birds, and other wildlife in the area, it wouldn't be difficult to gather the samples. As for the plants, there were easily over 100 types of weeds and flowers scattered throughout the village. However, it was already late in the day, and Orochimaru wasn't particularly in the mood to start gathering samples just yet. The next morning, Orochimaru arrived at the training ground as usual. However, his mind continued to wander, reflecting on the hardships he faced during the past 6 months while conducting his experiments. The raw materials for the basic genetic enhancement serum had been numerous and complex. Many of them had required careful decomposition, purification, and sometimes fusion. A slight miscalculation in the formula, even by a fraction, often led to failure. Each time he failed, he had to start all over again. At times, even a basic purification experiment would take over 10 days to complete. It was, without a doubt, a difficult journey for someone who had only just begun his foray into scientific research. Still, there were always more solutions than problems in this world. To avoid wasting precious raw materials, Orochimaru had chosen to practice his skills using common plants and food until he became proficient. Once he felt confident, he moved on to using the proper ingredients. Along the way, he'd also frequented Konoha's library, purchasing and reading numerous books related to his work. It had taken him half a year to finally complete what was considered a simple experiment. But simplicity was only in comparison to veteran scientists, people with decades of experience. For a beginner like Orochimaru, it had been anything but easy. As he strolled along the road to the training ground, Orochimaru's eyes drifted to the weeds growing along the roadside. An idea sparked in his mind. The genetic detector he had exchanged for was tucked away on the inside of his arm, concealed under the sleeve of his robe. Pulling out a small test tube, he plucked a random weed and began the analysis. Ding! A mountainweed specimen has been detected. However, the specimen is too low level to provide any energy for fusion. As expected, collecting random weeds works toward completing the task, Orochimaru thought. Ding! Plantain specimen detected. This specimen is too low level to provide any energy for fusion. Ding! Analyzing. He continued picking up various plants as he walked, testing them with the gene detector. After collecting samples from more than 10 species, he had already gathered several plant genes. Of course, the genetic detector repeatedly informed him that these plants weren't powerful enough to provide energy after fusion, which piqued his curiosity. System, can these plants still be fused, despite their low energy potential? He asked. Yes, host. How does the fusion process work? Please unlock the next technology. The next technology. Orochimaru glanced at the label on his interface that read Gene Fusion. I see. Gene extraction involved collecting samples from animals and plants, then extracting their genes through various methods such as decomposition, heating, or burning. But gene fusion, this would allow him to combine the extracted genes, creating something new. A sudden thought crossed his mind. If I can fuse animal and plant genes, shouldn't human genes also be capable of fusion? His eyes gleamed with excitement at the idea. The cells of the first Hokage. Orochimaru's mind raced. If he could obtain the cells of Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, who had the legendary would release, gene fusion could open up unprecedented possibilities. His hands clenched at the thought. "Hey, Orochimaru." "Good morning," a voice called out. Snapping out of his thoughts, Orochimaru looked up and saw Tsunade waving at him from a distance. He had arrived at the training ground without even realizing it. Tsunade had become a familiar presence in his life over the past half-year. After being assigned to the same team, they had spent a considerable amount of time training together. Orochimaru's indifferent demeanor had faded slightly over time, and he now regarded her with a certain familiarity. "Morning," Orochimaru replied with a nod, acknowledging her greeting. "You seem to be in a good mood today," Tsunade said with a smile, noticing his relaxed expression. She walked closer to him and added, "By the way, I've noticed that every time we finish training, you rush off somewhere. Do you have something important to do?" "I'll explain later," Orochimaru replied calmly, not offering much in the way of details. These advanced technologies were powerful, and given his current age, it wasn't the right time to reveal them. He preferred to keep his work a secret for now. Tsunade blinked, slightly taken aback by his nonchalant response. A faint blush crept up her cheeks. "It seems like you're really in a good mood today." To be honest, Orochimaru was quite handsome, especially now in his youth. His fair skin and long, flowing hair made him more attractive than many girls their age. Whenever he walked through the village, he often drew attention from other girls, leaving them blushing after a mere glance in his direction. Because of this, Tsunade had begun to develop a subtle admiration for him. In the original timeline, if Orochimaru hadn't been so reclusive and uninterested in women, Kato Dan might never have entered Tsunade's life. Perhaps Orochimaru and Tsunade would have had the opportunity to grow closer. Suddenly, Orochimaru's voice broke through her thoughts. "Can you give me a strand of your hair?" "Huh?" Tsunade blinked, caught off guard. Why would he want that? Chapter 18, Orochimaru's request was both confusing and unexpected. Asking for her hair in the middle of a casual conversation? Tsunade couldn't help but feel a mix of confusion and embarrassment. "Why do you want someone else's hair?" she stammered, her cheeks flushing slightly. Could it be? Tsunade's thoughts started running wild. Does he want to keep it as some kind of keepsake? A token of love, maybe? She already had a growing crush on Orochimaru, and in her mind, hair was something personal, even intimate. Given how shy she already felt around him, it was only natural that her imagination ran wild with possibilities. "If it's inconvenient, forget it," Orochimaru replied nonchalantly, his calm demeanor showing no sign of ulterior motives. "You." Tsunade, who had been shy moments ago, was now irritated by his total lack of awareness. How could he be so casual about asking for something like that? "You're so arrogant, asking someone for something so personal." Nevertheless, Tsunade reluctantly plucked a strand of her hair and handed it to him. "Here!" Had it been anyone else, she probably would have been furious, but since it was Orochimaru, she begrudgingly complied. This guy is such a straight-laced fool, she thought. Orochimaru took the hair calmly, his expression still as unreadable as ever. "Thank you," he said, his voice even and polite. No. You're welcome." Tsunade stuttered, surprised by his sudden politeness. She wasn't used to Orochimaru being so formal with her. Without saying another word, Orochimaru slipped the strand of hair into the sleeve of his robe, where his genetic detector was hidden. Ding, human hair specimen detected. Quality, medium. Slight life energy can be extracted upon fusion. Huh. Tsunade's gene quality is only medium? Orochimaru murmured to himself. Just a little life energy? I was hoping for more, perhaps the legendary vitality of the Senju. After months of experimentation, Orochimaru had come to understand a lot more about how the gene extraction process worked. While hair could offer some genetic material, it wasn't as accurate or potent as samples taken from flesh and blood. But even with the limitations of hair, the results here were still valid. The realization struck him that Tsunade's genetic potential wasn't as high as he had initially assumed. Tsunade's genes really are just average? It made sense when he thought about it. The Senju clan had indeed been powerful, but there were only a few standout figures known throughout history. In Tsunade's generation, even her parents didn't achieve any particular fame. In fact, Tsunade's own chakra reserves weren't all that impressive unless she used the Yin seal. Without that technique, her chakra capacity was arguably lower than even Jiraiya's, an average civilian-born ninja. With that in mind, the system's analysis seemed accurate. Only a little life energy, Orochimaru pondered. After a moment of thought, he decided he would save these genes for later, once he unlocked gene fusion. He could then choose the best genes for fusion, aiming to maximize his benefits. "Hey! Why are you two still standing around here?" a loud voice called from a distance. Orochimaru and Tsunade turned their heads simultaneously. "Jiraiya, what do you want?" Tsunade asked. "Hiruzen-sensei's busy today," Jiraiya said with a grin, "so he told me to let you know we're disbanded for the day." "What?" Orochimaru was lucky, and not just because of his status. Being one of the future legendary Sannin meant he had a bright future ahead. But from the moment he transmigrated into this world, his position had been unique. In the harsh world of ninja villages, ordinary civilian-born ninjas were often looked down upon or bullied. But neither Orochimaru nor Jiraiya had to deal with that. Why? Because they had a teacher, and their teacher Hiruzen was a disciple of the second Hokage. Thanks to this connection, no one dared bully them, not even the Uchiha clan members who usually held themselves in high regard. After all, who would risk offending the Hokage's disciple? Taking advantage of this rare free time, Orochimaru said his goodbyes to Jiraiya and Tsunade. He had more important matters to attend to, specifically gathering plant and animal specimens for his experiments. Tsunade and Jiraiya, accustomed to Orochimaru's solitary habits, didn't think much of it as he wandered off. "He's always doing his own thing," Tsunade remarked. "Yeah, but hey, I've got something to show you." Jiraiya grinned, an air of excitement in his voice. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "Something to show me? What is it?" Jiraiya's confidence radiated as he pulled out a kunai, nicked his finger, and quickly began forming hand seals. "Watch this. Summoning jutsu." With a loud slap on the ground, black runes spread out from the point of contact, and in an instant, white smoke billowed around him. As the smoke cleared, a small toad appeared in front of them. Tsunade blinked. "This is..." Jiraiya puffed out his chest, arms crossed proudly. "What do you think? Pretty cool, right? I've learned how to summon toads from Mount Maiboku. Impressed yet?" Ever since he had signed the contract with the toads of Mount Maiboku, Jiraiya had been eager to show off his new abilities, especially to Tsunade. He wanted her to see that he wasn't just a slacker, he was powerful, too. Tsunade had originally been slightly impressed. However, the moment she saw Jiraiya's smug expression, her pride kicked in, and she rolled her eyes. "It's just a summoning jutsu. What's the big deal? I can do that too." "What?" Jiraiya immediately deflated, his excitement crashing into disbelief. "You can do it too?" "Of course. Watch." With a similar motion, Tsunade bit her finger, performed the seals, and slammed her hand to the ground. A second plume of white smoke appeared, and when it dissipated, a small slug stood next to Jiraiya's toad. This is..." Jiraiya was stunned, his jaw nearly hitting the floor. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Tsunade had summoned something too? Tsunade grinned smugly. "How about that? Did I lie to you?" Jiraiya stood in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. He had been so proud of his new skill, only to discover that Tsunade, who hadn't bragged about it at all, could do the same thing. But Jiraiya stammered, still trying to salvage his pride. Even so, I'm definitely stronger than Orochimaru. Tsunade gave him an unimpressed look. You'd better stop dreaming. Even if you know the summoning technique, I'm sure Orochimaru knew it a long time ago. He's just not as showy as you. No way. Jiraiya's world was collapsing. How's it impossible? If you don't believe me, go ask him. I will. Jiraiya's confidence was shattered as he stormed off, determined to find out if what Tsunade said was true. Meanwhile, Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle at his frustration, knowing full well that Orochimaru likely did know the summoning jutsu and that he was the type to keep such abilities to himself. Poor Jiraiya, she thought with a smirk. He's got a long way to go. Chapter 19. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining an ant specimen. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining. Orochimaru's mind churned as the system continued its updates. Does the same species only count as one specimen? He wondered aloud. After listening to the system's explanation, he realized something important. It seemed that in order to complete the task of gene extraction, each unique species would only be counted once, regardless of how many individuals he collected. For example, if he gathered cells from several humans, they would all still count as one species. The same logic applied to animals. He could collect different varieties of the same species, but they wouldn't count toward new tasks. That makes sense, Orochimaru mused. It didn't affect his research at all. For someone like him, collecting 100 species was child's play. Well, this should be easy enough, he muttered, his golden eyes glinting with confidence. As he continued walking, something in the distance caught his attention: a cemetery. It seemed eerily familiar to him. After a moment, realization struck. Ah, of course. This was the resting place of his parents in this world. No wonder it stirred a sense of familiarity within him. With a slight pang of nostalgia, Orochimaru made his way to the Yamanaka clan's flower shop, purchased a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, and returned to his parents' grave. He laid the flowers before the stone with a sense of quiet reverence. Even though I'm not the Orochimaru you once knew, he said softly, bowing deeply in front of the tombstone, I still owe you this respect. Consider it my filial duty. After paying his respects, Orochimaru turned to leave. But as he was about to step away, something white behind the tombstone caught his eye. Curiosity piqued, he moved quickly, stepping behind the stone and picking up the strange object. What's this? Snakeskin? But, it's white, he mumbled. Before he could examine it further, a familiar voice called out from a distance. Hey, Orochimaru. Looking up, he saw Jiraiya running toward him. Orochimaru quickly stuffed the white snakeskin into his robe, concealing it from view. What's up? Orochimaru asked, his voice calm and even. I need to ask you something. Jiraiya began. Summoning jutsu? Orochimaru repeated, blinking in mild surprise as Jiraiya explained. That's right, he had been so busy with his experiments that he had nearly forgotten that all three of the future Sannin had their own signature summons. Tsunade had already mastered her slug summoning, and now it seemed Jiraiya had learned to summon toads. How could I have overlooked this? Orochimaru mused. Tsunade told me you already knew how to summon creatures too, but I didn't believe her. Jiraiya said, his tone slightly accusing. So I came to ask for myself. Hey, show me if you can do it. I can't, Orochimaru replied bluntly, not wanting to waste any time. What? You really can't? Jiraiya's disbelief was evident on his face. I have no reason to lie to you. Ha! Jiraiya burst into laughter, his pride swelling. See? Jiraiya-sama, had to work so hard to master summoning, and you, Orochimaru, have never even done it before. I knew it! Jiraiya's glee was almost palpable as he pranced around, clearly reveling in his victory. Orochimaru, however, had no interest in entertaining his antics. He simply turned and began walking away, uninterested in Jiraiya's childish celebration. "Hey! Where are you going? Don't leave! Let's have a chat, come on!" Jiraiya called after him, but Orochimaru waved him off dismissively. "Boring," Orochimaru muttered, making it clear he wasn't going to engage further. Later that night, Orochimaru lay on his bed, his mind racing with thoughts as he stared at the white snakeskin he had retrieved from the cemetery earlier. Though he had acted indifferent during the day, Jiraiya's words had left a small impression on him. Tsunade probably learned summoning from her family, Orochimaru thought. The slug's size is directly proportional to the amount of chakra used, so she can summon it no matter how small her reserves are. As for Jiraiya, he had learned the summoning technique from Hiruzen. The fool had used the technique without a contract and had accidentally been transported to Mount Maiboku, the land of the toads. But what about Orochimaru? There were plenty of scrolls in my parents' inheritance, but none contained the summoning technique, let alone any mention of summoning snakes. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Could it be that because I'm a reincarnator, the opportunity that should have belonged to the original Orochimaru is gone? Suddenly, a loud boom echoed through the house, jolting Orochimaru from his thoughts. "What was that?" he muttered, quickly sitting up. Another thud followed soon after. This time, Orochimaru pinpointed the source of the noise. It was coming from the living room. In a few quick steps, he made his way out of his room and into the hallway, his senses sharp as he approached the living room. Boom! The sound rang out again. Orochimaru's golden eyes scanned the room, searching for the source. "It's coming from under the floor. Is something hitting the floor from below?" A sudden thought struck him. Could there be a hidden basement beneath the house? It wouldn't be unusual for a ninja family to have secret passageways or basements. Orochimaru's parents might have dug the basement before he was even born, and he simply hadn't known about it. Without wasting any time, Orochimaru began scanning the floor for any signs of a trapdoor or secret entrance. As a ninja, searching for hidden passages was a basic skill. After moving a few pieces of experimental equipment into his system's storage, he found the source of the noise, a thick wooden panel in the far right corner of the room. The muffled thudding was coming from beneath it. Orochimaru knocked on the panel, confirming it was hollow. Cautiously, he drew a kunai and slipped his hand into the gap at the edge of the floorboard, ready for whatever might come. Squeak! The floor panel lifted easily, revealing a secret compartment below. A massive python, as thick as an adult's calf, reared its head from the dark hole beneath the floor. The creature's body was covered in intricate flower-like patterns, and its golden eyes, with vertical slits, locked onto Orochimaru's. It hissed, flicking its tongue menacingly. Orochimaru's first instinct was to retreat and defend himself, but something held him back. The giant snake didn't seem to have any intention of attacking him. Instead, it stared at him intently, its gaze almost assessing. After a few tense moments, the python opened its mouth, revealing something unexpected, a scroll. The large serpent dropped the scroll onto the floor in front of Orochimaru, then slithered back into the darkness beneath the house. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed as he bent down and picked up the scroll, feeling its weight in his hands. A summoning scroll? He wondered. As he slowly unrolled it, the truth became clear. Chapter 20. The unexpected joy from Orochimaru discovering the white python overwhelmed him momentarily. His instincts, however, did not lead him to attack. Instead, his first thought was to step back. Why attack a snake when I should be one of them? He mused. If he attacked the snake, how could he expect to forge a bond with them later? Luckily, the flower-patterned python didn't seem hostile, but Orochimaru remained cautious. After all, sudden kindness from a snake wasn't something to be taken lightly. Glancing at the scroll the python had dropped, he quickly formulated a plan. While keeping a wary eye on the snake, he reached for the scroll. Upon inspecting it, he found that the scroll itself wasn't particularly unique, save for what it recorded the origin of this snake. Was this snake raised by my parents? Orochimaru thought aloud, his golden eyes narrowing. Could it be that they implanted a spiritual mark in its subconscious, so it wouldn't attack me? His gaze returned to the massive snake. Orochimaru was well aware that each of the Sannin had their own signature summon creatures. Jiraiya had the toads of Mount Maiboku, Tsunade had her slugs from Shikatsu Forest, and he, Orochimaru, would eventually summon the snakes of Ryochi Cave. But this snake in front of him? It wasn't speaking, unlike the high-level toads or the intelligent slug Tsunade summoned. Most snakes from Ryochi Cave didn't have the gift of speech unless they were particularly special. It can't speak? Orochimaru thought, pondering the situation. So how did the original Orochimaru control these snakes? His mind worked through the possible explanations. Do I need to sign a summoning contract first? Orochimaru muttered. That makes sense, but how do I go about signing the contract? Do I need to visit Ryochi Cave? Just as these thoughts were crossing his mind, the flower-patterned python reacted. Bah! The python hissed and gestured toward the basement, seemingly asking him to follow. Do you want me to go down with you? Orochimaru asked tentatively. Bah! The python nodded, or at least it seemed to. Orochimaru hesitated for a moment, but quickly decided to follow. With my current strength, I should be able to handle anything unexpected. He walked down into the basement, fully aware of his surroundings. The basement was small, and the lighting was poor. Realizing the darkness would hinder him, Orochimaru quickly returned upstairs to fetch a candle. Once lit, the soft glow of the flame illuminated the space, revealing two objects sitting before him. One was an intricately detailed scroll, and the other was a long iron box. Orochimaru sat cross-legged in his living room, the two items placed beside him. Behind him, the flower-patterned python coiled quietly, its tongue flickering in and out as it watched him obediently. The creature's docile nature surprised Orochimaru. It seemed surprisingly loyal and calm in his presence, an unexpected contrast to the snake's usual aggressive reputation. This snake is unusually well-behaved, Orochimaru thought, though he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. There were more pressing matters at hand. He turned his attention to the two objects in front of him. Even with all his experiments and experiences, he couldn't help but marvel at what he had found. So my father had a summoning contract with the snakes of Ryochi Cave too? Orochimaru's mind raced. It seemed that this python had been summoned by his father to guard these two treasures. Orochimaru recalled that in the basement, there had been a tunnel leading out of Konoha village, allowing the python to leave to hunt for food. That explained how the creature had survived in hiding for so long. The python had been living beneath the house for a year, sustaining itself by catching prey from the outside. What a pleasant surprise! Orochimaru said to himself, his voice filled with rare emotion. He calmed his excitement and examined the long iron box next to the scroll. The box wasn't locked but had a simple seal that required chakra to unlock. Orochimaru channeled a bit of chakra into the seal, and soon the box creaked open. Inside the box was a shining silver sword, its blade gleaming in the dim candlelight. Orochimaru's eyes widened, his pupils contracting. It really is Kusanagi. In his memories, this very sword had been used by him to kill both the fourth Kazekage, Raza, and his former master, the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. While the Kusanagi sword wasn't a divine artifact, it was incredibly sharp and could extend, shorten, and transform at will, making it a formidable weapon. Beside the sword lay a letter. Orochimaru opened it slowly. Countless words appeared before his eyes, written in a familiar hand. Boy, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer in this world. There was no doubt this was a letter left behind by Orochimaru's father. The letter explained how his father had obtained the sword by chance. Before heading to the battlefield, he had a premonition that he might not survive. Fearing that the sword would fall into enemy hands, he hid it away in the basement, entrusting it to the care of the python. The letter warned Orochimaru of the sword's immense value and power, advising him to only use it once he was strong enough. His father cautioned him never to display the Kusanagi in front of others until he was capable of wielding it effectively. So that's why Orochimaru in the original timeline always kept this sword inside his body. Orochimaru chuckled darkly. He remembered vividly how the original Orochimaru would summon the Kusanagi by having a snake regurgitate it from his mouth, a sight that was as bizarre as it was unsettling. Disgusting, Orochimaru thought with a grimace. The original Orochimaru must have altered his body through countless experiments, turning himself into something less humane. That won't be me, Orochimaru decided firmly. He had no intention of becoming a grotesque snake-human hybrid. His experiments would be different. Placing the Kusanagi sword to the side, he picked up the scroll. As expected, it was a summoning contract. His father's name was written at the top, marking him as a summoner of Ryochi Cave. According to the instructions on the contract, Orochimaru would need to sign his name on the bottom and then leave a bloody handprint to finalize the agreement. It was a simple process, one that he had been familiar with from his knowledge of the original story. Without hesitation, Orochimaru followed the instructions. He pricked his finger, signed his name, and placed a blood-stained handprint on the scroll. As the blood seeped into the scroll, Orochimaru felt a sudden shift within his mind. Something foreign yet familiar embedded itself into his consciousness, a connection to Ryochi Cave and its serpentine inhabitants. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. "Master, please issue your command." Orochimaru blinked in surprise. The voice belonged to the flower-patterned python coiled behind him. "So, after signing the contract, I can communicate with these snakes telepathically?" That's the end of this tale for now. Make sure to check out the other stories, and the Discord down below. Like and sub, and I'll see you in part 2. Peace.